Hello, glad to see you on my channel. I really value it. And today I want to share with you a wonderful story. It's a dramatic story that will come as a total shock to everybody. It is a really amazing story. So enjoy watching it.
Diana was unbearably bored. All day long, she had to devote herself only to her 2-year-old daughter. Was that what she was aiming for when she was so diligently wooing the rich and promising John? Diana had succeeded. She married him, but it wasn't how she'd envisioned a wealthy family life. In Diana's dreams, it looked different. She imagined how Mary will travel abroad, dine only in expensive restaurants, visit beauty salons, and lying by the pool, sipping cocktails. In reality, it didn't work out that way. John worked all day, and yes, she was not mistaken. He was a very promising young man. He had recently purchased a large 2-story cottage in an elite area of the city. However, the repair was not yet finished, and even now on the second floor of the incessant drilling, knocking workers, talking in an incomprehensible language. Immediately after the wedding, John insisted on having a child, which Diana was not ready for. She has long tried to persuade her husband to live for himself, but the man was adamant. At the time of the wedding, he was 30 years old, and he was ready for fatherhood. But Diana was only 22, and she wanted to flutter and enjoy life. It didn't work out. A year later, Alice was born, and Diane had to immerse herself in endless diapers and formula. Sleepless nights and baby sores drove the girl crazy. John, on principle, did not hire a nanny to help Michael. He turned out to be a good husband, caring and generous, but at the same time, too authoritarian. The man had his own principles, and he never deviated from them. One of these principles was that he believed that the young wife should watch over her daughter only herself. My mom raised me without any nannies. That's why we had such a close bond until the day she died. And you'll be fine. So tell me, what else do you have to do? We hired an au pair. No cooking, no cleaning. Just devote yourself to your daughter dying. That's easy to say, devote yourself. Every day is Groundhog Day. Diana hated even going to the park, where there was a big playground. That's where all the rich moms in the neighborhood usually gathered. At first, Diana was happy to get to know them all, hoping to socialize with them. But socializing with them was just talking about the kids. Diana was sick of it. If it were up to her, she wouldn't show her nose on the playground. But John insisted on daily walks, saying the baby needed fresh air. Of course he needed fresh air, Diana grumbled, gathering her daughter for a walk. Then he would walk by himself among these clutches. Happy Alice grabbed her sandbox set and a ball. The girl did not fit all this in her hands, and she, frowning her eyebrows, looked at her mother. Alice, let's take one thing, either a ball or a set. The girl hardly spoke yet, but she was good at the word no. Diana sighed unhappily, took the ball in her hands, and went to the exit of the cottage. On the one hand, getting out into the fresh air now was better than being among the endless sounds of the renovation. Diana and her daughter had just left the gate when a 10-car pulled up sharply beside them. Diana's excited friend Anna jumped out of it. Diana, hi. It's so great that I managed to catch you. Look, with what guys I met. Anna led her eyes in the direction of the car, from the windows of which 2 handsome guys were smiling. We're going to the beach now. Come with us. Diana was horrified. John would kill me if he found out. How would he find out? You'll be home before he gets home. If anything, you can tell him you got held up walking your daughter in the park. Alice won't give us away, will she? Anna winked at the little girl, knowing she wasn't talking yet. Diana hesitated. On the one hand, she really wanted to have fun with these cute guys, but on the other hand, she was afraid that her husband might find out. The girl was silent, thinking, and Anna hurried her. Diana, let's go. Don't let me down. I said I'd be with a friend. The guys are shopping for the picnic. They got champagne for you and me. I don't know what to think. Just get in the car. Okay. Diana's making up her mind. Is it okay that I'm with child? I told the guys you're a young mom. It's okay. Alice can play on the beach. What difference does it make to her where she builds her dollies? Diana nodded and, taking her daughter in her arms, went to the tent. She sat on the back seat, met the guys, and asked them to stop by the store on the way to buy juice and cookies for her daughter. The girl needed something to do too. The guys drove to a remote beach where Diana had never been before. "Wow," she exclaimed, getting out of the car and lowering her daughter onto the sandy beach. "What a steep shore here." "Yes," nodded one of the guys. "It's pretty dangerous in this place. I'll tell you more. There's a whirlpool under that steep shore. You can get sucked in no time. We won't swim there. We'll swim here, where there's a gentle slope. At least it's less crowded. Imagine how crowded the city beaches are now. There's nowhere to spit." Diana agreed with that. Going to a crowded beach in the company of guys, a married girl does not need to. And here, in fact, it was not crowded. Apart from their company, there was only a young married couple with a boy of about 5 years old. The wife was in an old faded swimsuit, long out of fashion, and the couple had nothing on the bedspread except a water bottle. "How did they get here?" Anna asked in a whisper. "I don't see a car." "They probably came on foot," grinned one of the guys, taking bags of food and drinks out of the trunk. "All right, let's get away from them and start getting settled. Girls, there's a blanket over there. Lay it down." In half an hour, the married company, which had time to swim, was laughing. The guys, despite the fact that one of them was driving, drank strong alcohol, and Diana and Anna sipped champagne coquettishly. Diana didn't regret in the slightest that she had agreed to this trip. It had been fun with the guys. And Alice apparently was not bored. The beach was sandy and the girl did her favorite thing. Armed with a set for the sandbox, little girl diligently tried to mold figures. Bacchum, a little shy, a boy approached her, the son of the vacationers in the neighborhood. Alice smiled and handed him her trowel. When the boy took it, the girl ran to her mom and pointed to the juice box. Diana stuck a tube in it and handed the juice to her daughter. Alice went back to her new friend and generously handed him the juice, but then the mom pulled the girl back. "Alice, don't let the boy drink from your tube. You can't do that. What if he's sick?" The boy's parents heard this shout and looked at each other. "I should have bought Michael some lemonade," the young woman sighed. The man nodded sullenly at her. Georgia shivered slightly under the appraising glances of the girls in the neighboring company. Her husband jumped up from his seat and took Michael by the hand and walked toward the river. He offered to take a swim, but she didn't feel like it. She felt uncomfortable when the girl forbade her daughter to share her juice with Georgia's son. And they only had a bottle of water with them. It's understandable. The family was desperately short of money. Georgia and her husband Steve had recently bought a one-room apartment and had gotten into huge debts. To pay off these debts, Steve worked like a curse, grabbed any part-time job, and when he was offered a column on the replacement of the roof in one of the houses of the private sector, the young man happily grabbed it. Of course, safety in such places was completely absent, and Steve did not hold on to the roof and collapsed, suffering injuries. It took him several months to recover, and he was unable to work during that time. Georgia's nurse's salary was barely enough to pay the rent and buy a rudimentary set of groceries, and the family still had to pay for kindergarten, buy him clothes, and wanted to treat the child sometimes, which unfortunately happened less and less often. Steve didn't work, debts were piling up, but Georgia didn't despair. Nothing. Steve is a very hard-working man and is almost well. Pretty soon he'll be back to work and the family will be back on their feet, paying off their debts. Today, Georgia had a rare day off and she wanted to get away with her beloved family. They'd chosen this normally deserted beach to get away from people. It didn't matter that it was a 40-minute walk to the beach. As luck would have it, this rowdy bunch of guys rolled in and ruined Georgia's mood. She knew one of the guys visually. He'd gone to the same school as her and lived not far from her parents. The rest of the merrymakers were unfamiliar to Georgia. The girl immediately noticed the arrogant, appraising look the girl's mom gave her, and she felt a little ashamed of her old swimsuit. "Well, so be it," immediately restrained Georgia. "Let me wear a swimsuit of 100 years ago, but next to my beloved husband and son. I'm happy with them and someday we'll have everything." The company was walking very cheerfully, noisily splashing in the river, loudly clinking, laughing. The little girl was left to herself, and it was evident that she was very glad when Michael joined her in her games. But then the girl's mother shouted at her and Georgia realized that the rest was ruined. "Steve, I'm tired. Why don't we go home?" she said quietly to her husband. The man looked at her shrewdly. He understood his wife with half a word. Well, let's have one last rinse. Are you coming? Georgia shook her head in the negative, and Steve, shouting to the son, went with him to the river. After a while, Diana, who was already quite tipsy, noticed that the couple resting in the neighborhood began to gather. Oh, at last, she wrinkled her pretty nose. Finally, they are leaving. I do not like that my Alice with this boy plays. They are like that. What are they like? Asked Diana, one of the guys with whom she was having fun. I know this girl. I went to school with her. She's all right. And her husband seems to be quite normal. Diana shrugged uncertainly and turned away from the couple. Let's have a drink, she said cheerfully, and grabbed a shot glass with strong alcohol, as they had long since finished the champagne with Anna. The girl Alice stood on the sand and sadly watched her new acquaintance, a boy Michael, taken away from the beach by his mom and dad. The girl kicked the ball with all her might, and it rolled down the beach and rolled down a steep cliff. Alice ran after the ball. The girl ran up to the cliff. The ball was not visible. Alice carelessly hung down, trying to see it in the water. Through the loud laughter, no one but Anna heard a slight shriek and a splash of water. Anna looked around and didn't immediately realize that something was wrong. When she did, she shouted loudly, Diana, where's Alice? Where is your daughter? Diana looked around with a dazed look. Where is she? Where did she go? She didn't run away. She fell in the water. I heard a splash. As if on cue, the whole group jumped to their feet and ran to the steep bank. There were circles in the water, and in the center of those circles, Alice's ball floated orphaned. Diana abruptly began to sober up and was thrown into hysterics. Alice, daughter, I can't swim, somebody jump in. Save my daughter. The girl threw herself on the guys' chests. But her new acquaintances stood there with their eyes down. They had warned in advance about the whirlpool in this place, and they didn't want to drown because of a girl they didn't know and her child. Diana howled and tried to push the boys to the shore to save Alice, but they froze in place. And then, past the standing guys and the girl struggling between them, a male figure flashed by lightning and dived into the water. Steve, what are you doing? There was a shout behind them. It was Georgia, literally dragging her son by the hand. She and her husband hadn't gotten far before they heard Diana howling. Steve instantly realized what was going on and reacted with lightning speed. Georgia and Michael ran to the shore and now, along with the others, kept their eyes on the water closing over Steve. The time dragged on for an agonizingly long time. It was only a few seconds, but it seemed an eternity to those standing on the shore. It was little Michael who was the first to fall. The boy roared loudly and began to call for his father. Then Georgia screamed. Panic grew. The girl's head appeared on the surface of the water with her eyes closed. Steve came up next, struggling to breathe and trying to push the little girl out of the maelstrom. It was obvious that the man was exhausted. The boys on the shore fussed. They scrambled down and, getting as far into the water as they could, held out their hands to the girl. Steve pushed the little girl toward them as hard as he could and disappeared under the water in the same second. Diana ran around the shore around her pale daughter, who was being given CPR by Anna, and ignored the wailing Georgia, whose husband had not come out of the water. Alice coughed and opened her eyes. Diana exhaled, grabbed her daughter in her arms, held her tightly against her. The girl cried. Only then did Diana look at Georgia running along the shore and almost tearing her hair out. What about her husband? One of the boys shook his head mournfully, lowering his eyes. That was it. He didn't swim out. I guess his strength's gone. Should we call whoever we're supposed to call in these cases? Police, divers? How do we call them? Diana was confused. Then everyone will know. Find out what? The guy didn't understand. That we were here. My husband will know. No, I can't let that happen. You call whoever you want. I'm calling a cab and I'm leaving. Diana, what are you doing? That man drowned to save your daughter, and he saved her, a dazed Anna exclaimed. And I'm grateful to him for that. Diana cut him off. But my husband mustn't know anything about it. The bewildered Georgia floundered on the shore. The girl hardly realized what was happening and did not notice the moment when the cab left the beach with her daughter. It still seemed to Georgia that Steve was about to surface, and she ran, keeping her eyes on the water. When the police arrived, she begged them to get her husband out, and Michael roared loudly as he sat on the sand. At some point, Georgia came to her senses, walked over to her son, and slumped down beside him and put her arm around his shoulders. "Don't cry, son. Daddy will be all right. He must have surfaced somewhere else." The girl herself believed what she was telling her son. How could it be any other way? She couldn't think of any other outcome. They can't be without Steve. They just can't. And he can't just leave them alone. After a while, the policeman began to insist that Georgia should go home and the search should continue here without her. The girl shook her head stubbornly, sitting on the sand and hugging her son. She began to sway, as if in a trance, from side to side. One of the policemen, wanting to bring the girl to her senses, said to her rather rudely, "Stop thinking about yourself and think about your child. Look at your son. Why should he see all this?" These words sobered Georgia a little, and she looked at Michael. The boy couldn't cry anymore. He whimpered like a frightened kitten, clinging to his mother's side and staring at the river with swollen slits in his eyes. "Yes, Michael, come on. I'll take you to Grandma's. Then I'll be back." She turned to the policeman. "Back as soon as I take the baby to his mom." Steve wasn't found until the third day, when his body floated to the surface. Diane was waiting for her husband to come home from work. In the last few days, she had been such a good wife, just a goody-goody. In fact, the girl was very scared. Every day she called her friend Anna and found out how the search for the man who had saved her daughter was progressing. Strictly Nastrogo Diana had instructed Anna to keep silent about their presence on the beach. Although, of course, both the police and the lifeguards were aware that the man they were looking for was a hero who had saved a child at the cost of his own life. But the mother of this child did not want publicity and left before the police arrived on the scene. Well, that's her right. No one could force gratitude. Still, Diana was shaking. Every day, when her husband returned from work, the first thing she did was to look anxiously into his face to see if he had found out anything. The girl realized that she was guilty on all sides. She went to the beach with strange guys, drank with them, and poorly washed her daughter. Yes, what a sin to say. Diana at that moment was a lot of fun, and at times she even forgot that Alice was playing nearby. But then again, even in those thoughts, Diana managed to blame her husband. It was his own fault. Locked her here, in four walls with a child, no rest, no respite. So she went off the rails. Obviously, John wouldn't accept that excuse. What would he do if he knew the truth? Divorced her the same day, at the very least. Diana was sure of that, knowing well the resolute temper of her husband. He'd also be able to sue for his daughter on the basis of what had happened. Diana shuddered at the thought. Don't think about bad things. Everything will be fine. Anna would keep quiet. It was her fault, and the boys knew nothing about Diana. Through the window opened on the first floor, Diana heard her husband's car drive into the yard. The girl put on a smile, fixed a beautiful bow on her daughter's head, and ran to meet her husband. "Oh, John, you're earlier than usual today. Alice and I missed you. Haven't we, Alice?" John smiled dutifully at Michael, absorbed in his own thoughts. And at dinner he was quite distracted, nodding occasionally at Diana's incessant chatter. "John, what are you always thinking about?" My wife couldn't stand it. "Do you even listen to what I'm telling you?" "Yeah, I'm sorry. I was just thinking. I heard a story today. A man drowned in our town 4 days ago. They pulled him out yesterday." "No, I haven't heard." Diana's tense. "Well, drowned and drowned. It happens. Why do you care so much?" "It's just the details. The man rushed to save someone else's child, a girl, I think. He managed to save her, pushed her to the surface, but he ran out of strength and drowned. Can you imagine?" "Well done. What can I say?" Diana shrugged. "He's not just a good man," John said indignantly. "The man is a hero. I keep thinking, yes, many people would give their lives for their own child." John looked at Alice. "But for someone else's? Let's say, would I be able to throw myself into the maelstrom for someone else's child like him? I don't know. I'm not sure. It's a very dangerous place, and everyone knows it. That man knew it too, and he deliberately took the risk for someone else's girl. I admire people like that." Diana sat there, dead or alive. How unpleasant this conversation was for her. She really wanted to change the subject, but John wouldn't let her. No, but you know what the best part is? The mom of the rescue girl took her daughter and left the shore right after the man drowned. She didn't wait for the rescuers, nor did she express her gratitude to this Michael, who was also there by the way. Nothing. Nobody knows who she is. The only rumor is that she was drunk and didn't take care of her child. It was entirely her fault that the girl fell into the river. So drunk, Diana muttered angrily, "I don't know how life happens. John, we don't know all the details. Let's not judge anyone." "I am," John said defiantly. "I do judge a mother like that. She goes to the river with a little kid and drinks there. She's probably from a dysfunctional background and unmarried. A normal woman wouldn't act like that. And that man had a family, a small son. They say they were already poor, and now they were left without a breadwinner. And for whom, you ask yourself? Some naughty mom." The more her husband got angry, the colder Diana got. It's even worse than she thought. I can't imagine what her husband would do if he found out she was his wife. "John, what if you and I were to take a trip somewhere?" Diana blurted out. "No, but seriously, you and I had a lot of fun. We didn't go on a wedding trip. Then Alice was born. Let's go on vacation." "Okay, let's try it," John suddenly agreed. "Tomorrow I'll go to work and try to solve the most important issues. Maybe we'll go to the sea, if only for a while." The next day, Diana was not herself. She couldn't wait for John to come home from work, and her anxiety was growing. She wanted to get out of town before this story died down. Her husband had gotten a little too emotional about the so-called hero's behavior. Diane called her husband to see if he had been able to settle the important issues and if the trip would take place. When John reassured her, Diana happily rushed to the second floor to pack her things. Just then, the au-pair called out to her, "Diana, there's a girl at the gate asking for you." "What girl?" Diana was surprised. It was Sveka again. She jumped out and, with a quick step, reached the gate and opened it. All the blood drained from Diana's face when she saw who stood before her. It was Georgia, the drowned man's wife. "How did you find me?" Diana hissed at Georgia, closing the gate tightly behind her. "One of the guys you were on the beach with told me the address. He and I went to the same school." Georgia answered in a weak, quiet voice. She was staggering and dark circles under her eyes. She couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten, or if she'd eaten at all, since her husband's death. But Diana didn't care about the appearance of this grief-stricken girl. She was only angry. Angry that Georgia had come to her house. "What do you want? Why did you come here?" she asked her rudely. Georgia didn't seem to notice the aggression directed at her and continued to talk quietly. "You know, Steve was just found yesterday. His body. Now it's a funeral, and I don't have any money to bury him. We don't have any money. Not me. Not my mom. There's no one to turn to. We already owe everyone. Steve didn't work for a while. He was sick. What's it got to do with me? Why did you come to me?" It was only now that Georgia began to realize how rude Diana was being to her. She looked up, scrutinizing her face. "I thought maybe you could help me with money. I'll give it back, not right away, but I'll give it back." "Oh, that's it. You've come to beg for money. You think because your husband died for my daughter, I owe you money? Did I ask him to do that? It was only his decision. He couldn't assess his own strength. Couldn't get out. Whose fault is that?" "All right, well, just stay here. I'll be right back." Diana ran into the house, and Georgia stood puzzled. This was not the reaction she'd expected from the rescue girl's mom. Oh, not this. Georgia knew that if someone had saved Michael, she would have given that person everything she had and been grateful to the end of her life. And all she'd come to Diana for was a loan. While Georgia was pondering, Diana jumped out of the gate and shoved a couple of crumpled bills into the girl's sweaty palm. "Here, take these. I won't give you any more, and don't come here. You hear me? You don't have to give anything back, but don't ever show your face here again. And don't you dare implicate me in your husband's death. He took a dive, he drowned. Nobody pushed him into the river." Georgia stared into Diana's face with wide open eyes. She didn't even look at the denomination of the bills now clutched in her hand, but raised her hand and threw them at Diana's face with fury. "Choke on your handout. I don't know what my husband would have done knowing what you were like. He probably would have died for the girl anyway. That was Steve's thing. But except that I, if it were possible to rewind time, would never have let him jump in the river. I have hung a rock around his neck and held him down, wouldn't have let him. Georgia turned and walked away from the gate, and Diana picked up the bills from the ground and ran into the house, looking around cautiously to see if anyone had seen the scene. A couple days later, Steve's funeral was held. There were a lot of people there, and they were mostly strangers who didn't care. Many people in town had heard how the young man had died, and contrary to Georgia's expectations, the funeral was decent. People who learned about the difficult material polymechalia of the hero's family began to bring his wife money. They brought free of charge, who can bring as much as they can, from the world by the thread, as they say. The largest sum was brought to the girl from a businessman who wished to remain anonymous. The girl could not believe how many people around her cared and was immensely grateful to them. But the loss of her husband was very hard for her. For the first year, the girl lived as if in a trance, floating along the stream, not noticing anything and no one around except for her son. Money was constantly lacking, debts had not gone anywhere, and despite Steve's death, they had to be paid. Georgia worked 24 hours a day, taking a nursing job. She pulled the strain forgetting about herself and seeing the child only at night, but at the same time trying to make sure that he had everything he needed. Michael went to school, and despite the fact that his mother never had time to do his homework with him, he studied very well. The boy became independent early. Being with him in public, Georgia often caught envious glances of her son in the direction of children proudly walking with their dads. When Michael was 9 years old, a patient with an attack of appendicitis was admitted to the hospital where Georgia worked. This man was much older than Georgia, but nevertheless immediately began to give signs of attention to the young nurse. At first, the girl only waved away from such an intrusive beau, but then she thought, and why not? The man seems to be not bad, divorced. According to him, he's very fond of children, and Michael needs a man's attention. Georgia made up her mind and tried to introduce the man, whose name was Dustin, to her son. She was very nervous bringing a man into the house for the first time. Contrary to her fears, Michael took to Dustin calmly and even joyfully. The boy told his new acquaintance passionately about his schoolwork, and he listened attentively, shaking his head respectfully. Georgia exhaled with relief. So that's the way it's going to be. Michael would need a father, and she could stop working around the clock and spend more time with her son. It's so wonderful to have a strong male shoulder to lean on. In 3 months, Georgia and happy Michael moved into Dustin's apartment. It was a rather spacious 2-bedroom apartment in which the boy finally had his own room. Dustin was very kind and attentive, but only for the time being. As time went on, Georgia began to notice that the child was annoying her new man. Michael was so attracted to him and was ready to call him daddy, but apparently his stepfather didn't want him to. "Call me Uncle Dustin. I'm not your daddy. You're not a little boy. You understand everything." Dustin snapped at the boy, and Michael shrank back. Everything seemed to be the same, except that now Michael didn't run to his stepfather to brag about his success in school and tell him about his affairs. Dustin seemed to enjoy it. Over time, Georgia began to realize that this man needs more of a mistress in the house, who will cook, clean, and the child was in his way. And one day, far from being a beautiful day, Georgia returned from her shift and from the doorstep heard her son crying. The woman rushed into the room and saw Michael standing in the corner. His legs were covered in red stripes and his belt was lying next to him. Dustin, smirking smugly, sat in a chair. "Oh, you're here? Listen to what your son has done." Georgia didn't want to hear anything. The blood rushed to her head. The woman grabbed the belt that was lying on the floor and threw herself at the man, trying to whip him as hard as she could. She failed, of course. A small, angry woman jumping with a belt in her hands near a tall man looked silly. Not expecting such a violent reaction, Dustin intercepted Georgia's arm. "What are you so mad about? He's a boy, and boys are supposed to be raised. It wasn't a big deal. I whipped his ass. My father used to whip my ass like that when I was a kid. That's why I grew up to be a man." Georgia cried. She threw the belt away and ran to her son, who was still roaring in the corner. Michael, come on. We're going back to our apartment right now. You will never see that man again. After her failed affair with Dustin, Georgia had stopped looking at men altogether. The young woman had come to believe that strangers could never treat her son as their own, and she didn't want to worry about whether her new husband had hurt Michael. Besides, Georgia hadn't been able to get rid of Dustin for quite some time. After she and Michael had left, he'd initially stalked the woman, begging her to come back, saying he'd made a mistake and would never lay a finger on the child again. But Georgia did not even consider the option of returning. She has a strong aversion to Dustin. It turned out to be not all surprises on the man's part. Once he was convinced that the woman had left him for good, he showed his true vindictive nature. Dustin began filing complaints about Georgia to the head doctor as an incompetent medical professional, and he also stalked her co-workers and told them nasty things about the woman. Georgia was shocked by these behaviors, but Dustin didn't accomplish anything with it. Georgia was too well known at work to believe the ravings of an offended man. All of these events only reinforced Georgia's belief that she shouldn't consider men as potential husbands. She should devote herself to Michael, which she did. Georgia got back on her feet and started working around the clock to provide for her son. The woman's life resembled a daily struggle for survival, but her son pleased her as he grew up a boy smart, kind, fair. He's a lot like Steve, Georgia often thought. Only, is that a good thing? What did my husband's kindness lead to? To leaving us alone for the happiness of another man's family. It was that very family that Georgia saw in all its glory. Early one morning, she was coming back from another part-time job, tired. She had only a few hours to sleep and then back to the hospital. And then a large white car pulled up not far from her. Georgia didn't know much about cars, but even from the look of it, she could tell that it was very expensive. A man got out of the car first, and Georgia didn't pay him any attention until Diana stepped out of the passenger door. Georgia recognized her immediately in a flash. That hateful face seemed to have gotten even more beautiful. Why prettier? It was just better groomed. Now seeing Diana, the only expression that came to mind was gorgeous woman. Meanwhile, the man stepped to the back door of the car and, having opened it, helped the girl to get out. Alice was wearing a beautiful pink coat and white boots. Georgia's heart skipped a beat and she fixed her gaze on the child's face. It was because of this girl that her beloved husband was not in the world right now. Steve had given his life for her. Now she lives and he doesn't, and it could have been the other way around. How many times had Georgia replayed in her mind the events of that fateful day? Had they left then, just a few minutes earlier, and things would have gone differently. Steve would be alive and Michael would be growing up with a full family. And the woman herself wouldn't have had to work around the clock to feed her child. Steve. The woman's eyes filled with tears at the memory of him. How much she had loved him. He was probably the only man she could love in her life. Beautiful and happy as they looked, the family disappeared behind the doors of a store and Georgia watched them go. She hated Diana, but worst of all, and she couldn't help it, she seemed to hate the girl too. Her mind knew that the child was innocent, but her heart fluttered at the sight of this pretty little girl whose life her husband had given his own. Diana shrugged her shoulders shakily. She hadn't noticed Georgia, but she could feel the hateful stare directed at her back. Diana was already angry. Today, John had decided to take the day off, and instead of taking her to a restaurant, instead of devoting it to Michael, for example, he'd taken her and his daughter to a children's clothing store. Although Alice's closets are already overflowing with clothes. What's a baby need? She's growing up and some things do not even have time to wear once. And John liked to pamper the girl, dressing her up in expensive things, giving her toys without measure. What else can he do? Grinned Diana. He won't have any other children. At least he's made peace with that. As soon as Alice was a little older, her husband began to insist on having a second child. John wanted a son. He just wanted a son. And Diana was horrified at the suggestion. What child? She only had Alice off her hands. Diana exhaled, being able to take time for herself. And here it was again. The mere thought of sleepless nights with a baby in diapers terrified Diana. No, she didn't want that to happen again. She's not a soul after all, to give birth on demand. She wanted to live and live beautifully. Obviously, if Diana told her husband about it, he would only freak out, so she decided to do the trick here. For a long time, the woman pretended that she could not get pregnant, diligently protecting herself secretly from John. Then she got herself a fake checkup. In reality, the woman paid the head doctor of the gynecology clinic for the report she needed and, with a sorrowful expression on her face, handed it to her husband. "What is this?" John asked. "I do not understand anything in these medical terms. Explain in Russian what it says here." "It says here that I can never be a mother again. You see, I won't be able to get pregnant again." "That can't be," the man exclaimed. "What kind of diagnosis do you have?" "Everything can be cured nowadays if you pay well. If necessary, you will be treated abroad." "It's not curable. It's not curable," Diana shouted, trying to cry. The woman pretended to be hysterical. "What do you think? I didn't recognize it. What do you think it's like for me to get a diagnosis like that? I wanted a baby so badly. What's gonna happen now? You're gonna leave me?" Diana pretended to shake with sobs, covering her face with the palms of her hands, her eyes completely dry. Through the slits in her fingers, she watched her confused husband's reaction. "Diana, really? Why would I leave you because you're sick? Don't be silly. But maybe we could try." No, Diane shrieked. "I've been assured there's no cure." John hugged his wife reassuringly, deciding to return to this conversation a little later when she had calmed down. He had no reason not to believe Diana, though. Well, what kind of woman would attribute infertility to herself in the middle of nowhere? Diana was, in principle, satisfied with the result of her performance. And when, after a while, John tried to return to this conversation again threw a tantrum. And that's how she made her husband forget about the second child. And yet, Diana was sure that her husband would never leave her because he loved his only daughter too much. So let him be content with her. And Diana herself has other worries. Her personal life. Diana's light flirtation with a fitness trainer recently turned into a relationship, and she plunged into it with her head. Starting this relationship, Diana was shaking a lot. It was the first time she cheated on her husband. Well, on the other hand, what does John want, disappearing all day at work? Diane is young and beautiful, and men are paying attention to her. Diane was freaking out. Once again, her meeting with her new, young boyfriend had fallen through. John asked her to take Alice to the electronics store and pick out a new smartphone for her birthday. Her daughter's birthday was 2 weeks ago, though. It's just that Alice wasn't happy with the gift. Here the father had succumbed to the persuasion of the girl, decided to give her a smartphone. "Girls," Diana grinned. "The daughter is already quite an adult dating guys. Diana should know that." It was John who thought her daughter was still young, and Diana felt her daughter was her competition. Of course she did, because her last lover was only a little older than her daughter. And yet he has no idea how old she really is. Before leaving the house, Diana cast a fleeting glance in the mirror. She looks great. How could one guess her real age here? What a young beauty she is. Diane hurried on, seeing that her daughter was already waiting for her in the car with John's driver. That asshole could go off on her own. Although where can she go without money? "Mom," said Alice when the woman got into the car, "maybe I'll drive myself. I know you have no desire to ride with me. Give me the money, I'll grab my friend and we'll pick out a smartphone with her." The girl squinted slyly. "No way," sighed Diana. "Dad said to go together, so let's go." In the store, Alice went straight to the most expensive gadgets. "We should think." Diana, "we do not consider the cheap ones." This one poked her daughter's finger at the latest model of iPhone. "Mom, buy this one, but make sure it's gold-colored." "Young man," Diana called the sales consultant, "please come over." Calling the guy, Diana thought to just give him instructions to make a purchase, but when he came closer and the woman saw him, decided to do something else. "We want to buy this smartphone. Tell us about its features." The guy spoke, and Diana admired how young and handsome he was. No, really very handsome. Wavy black hair arranged in a fashionable hairstyle, and the eyes. You only see eyes like that in the movies. They seem to radiate light. Diana used all her tricks and flirted with the salesman, not noticing that her own daughter also keeps her eyes on this guy. The guy, on the other hand, only noticed the girl. He was inexperienced in the games of adult women and saw the girl's admiring gaze at once. "Oh, you explain everything so well," It's rare to find such competent salesmen. I'll probably become your regular customer, cooed Diana when the guy made the purchase. We are always happy to see you in our store, smiled the salesman on duty. Walking from the hip, Diana moved to the exit of the store. A disheveled Alice walked beside her. Near the door, she turned around to see the guy she liked once again. Her cheeks flushed when she saw that the salesman was also looking at her. Michael. Alice whispered the name she read on the guy's name tag. I'll come here again, Michael. Mother and daughter reached the house in silence, but when they got out of the car, away from the driver's ears, Diana seemed to realize, oh, daughter, and we forgot to buy you accessories for your phone. Headphones, a case for your new smartphone. All right, I'll go back to the store tomorrow and get it for you. What color case do you want? Don't, Mom. Alice got angry. You don't have to go anywhere. I'll buy the cover myself. Will you stop fluffing up your old feathers in front of young boys? How are you talking to me? Diana shrieked. What do you mean, old feathers? Where do you see an old lady? Come on, Mom, you're not 18 years old anymore, and you're still looking at young guys. It's only Dad who doesn't notice anything. Of course, in front of him, you behave differently, and I'm already ashamed to bring my friends into the house. As soon as a less handsome guy walks in, you start parading around. You think I don't know where you go when your dad's at work, and how reverently you keep your phone close to you at all times. Stop talking nonsense, Diana shouted. And where do you stick your nose anyway? Are you trying to tell me what to do with the chicken's eggs? I don't want to hear any more talk like that. You won't if you don't go to today's store to wag your tail in front of the salesman. But if you continue to push him around, I'll tell Daddy. Or I'll have him catch you in the act. I hate that you're lying to him, but I'm used to keeping quiet. I've been used to it since I was a kid. I don't think you deserve Daddy. I just don't want to disturb his peace of mind. I don't want to worry him. Alice shook a little. The first time in her life, she allowed herself to talk to her mother like that, although she had long been seething with indignation, seeing her mother's constant cheating. The girl did not listen to Diana's angry answer, but turned around and jumped out into the yard. She took out her cell phone and dialed her friend Alfia. She had recently turned 18 and her parents had given her a brand new car for her birthday. Alfia, hi. Are you busy right now? Could you take me somewhere? An hour later, the girls were sitting in the car and looking carefully at the huge glass doors of the electronics store where Alice had recently bought her smartphone. It's still half an hour before the store closes. Alfia grumbled unhappily, looking at the time on the dashboard. What are we going to sit here for so long? Let's go in and look at your handsome boy. No, Alice was afraid. I've only been here recently. He'll know I'm on purpose. Of course he will, but isn't that what you want if you like him so much? How are you going to get to know him? Also, you forgot something. Is it okay that you're dating Oliver? You think he'd be so cool with you telling him you like someone else? Oliver's a complicated guy, and I don't think he'd tolerate that. Why do I have to think about Oliver right now? Who says I'm gonna make it with this guy? Maybe he has a girlfriend. Well, judging by your burning eyes, you'd move any girl, Alfia smirked. Half an hour later, the store employees began to disperse to their homes. In the crowd, Alice almost missed a tall guy who went out in the company of girls employees of the store. There he is there, Alice shouted sharply, pointing her finger at the windshield. Start the car, Alfia. Let's go after him. Why are we going to chase him? My friend was surprised. Okay, as you say, it's not difficult for me. I can't see him now, of course, but by all appearances, the guy is in demand among the female sex. Look at all those girls chasing him. He walked with his colleagues only to the corner and then, saying goodbye, ran to the bus stop. The guy didn't notice the car following him. He was thinking about the girl customer he met in the store today. Her mom, of course, is a little strange, but they have the smell of wealth. The kind of smartphone they'd bought would take him several years to save up for. But for them, it must be nothing. Michael sighed. As much as he didn't like the girl, how could a simple salesman like her? Mom, are you home? I'm home, Michael shouted as he entered the apartment. Georgia, who had just returned from her shift, had already prepared a flavorful curry for her son. My hand, son, she looked out of the kitchen. We'll have dinner now. How delicious it smells, squeezed his eyes, sitting down at the table. When do you have time for everything? How many times have I told you, Mom? You are so tired. Come from work and rest. I am able to cook dinner myself. I don't mind. Georgia waved her hand. Come on, tell me, how was your day? What's new? I met such a girl today. She bought a phone for me yesterday with her mom, and today she came back to get a case for it. We got to talking. She's cool. I thought a girl like that would never pay attention to me, but she hinted that she'd like to meet me. Tomorrow's my day off, and I'm gonna see her. And she has such an unusual name, Alice. I just don't know where I'm supposed to take her. She seems to be from a very wealthy family, and what can I offer her? A movie and a coffee shop? Georgia, who at the mention of the girl's name had an unpleasant prickling in her stomach, nevertheless paid no attention to it. I'll tell you what, son, if a girl really likes you, she'll be glad to go to a cafe with you. But I don't trust them, those rich ones. Why did they need simple laborers like us? And you should pick an easy girl, but that's up to you. Tell me, how are your studies going? When's the next session? Michael had finished 11 grades well and had a great desire to get a higher education, but Georgia could not afford it. They both realized that. Then the guy made an independent decision. Immediately after school, he got a job as a salesman, and after saving up some money, he enrolled in correspondence school. I will pay for my studies myself, he told his mother. I'll work and study by correspondence. It's no big deal. You're already out of your skin to provide for us. Enough already, we will last now. Give up the rate of nurse. Georgia stubbornly refused. The woman felt guilty. All their lives they'd been struggling to make ends meet, and no savings and loan. If her son was going to go to college, he wouldn't have anything. She couldn't even pay for his education. The next day, Michael and Alice met in the city. The guy was a little embarrassed, leading the girl to the movies. What else could he offer this spoiled beauty? Alice didn't care. With this guy, she was ready to just walk around the city, holding hands. From one look of his expressive eyes, the girl's head was blown off. For the first time in her life, Alice fell in love like that without a second thought. It seemed that she was ready to follow Michael to the edge of Anna. Relationships were wrapped up rapidly. Alice, immediately after school, studying in the 11th grade, through half the city, was carried to a familiar store just to see Michael and interchange with him a few words. The first day, she went on a date with Michael. Alice gave her current boyfriend Oliver the runaround. Oliver was a 19-year-old major with a cool car and was totally unprepared for this turn of events. To be turned down? How could she? Usually girls chase after him, and he dumps them after he's played with them. Oliver's wounded ego was at play. Alice's friend Althea was silent as a partisan and did not want to explain to him the reason for such a sharp break in relations. Then Oliver himself decided to track down his ex-girlfriend. It was not difficult at all. Oliver only had to drive up to the school, and there she was, Alice, rushing to the bus stop and driving in the opposite direction from her house. When Oliver realized the reason for the breakup was another guy, he was furious. How could Alice dump him for some salesman? The guy was a sucker, and Oliver's sneakers alone were worth more than all the clothes on that salesman, and probably more than all the things he had. Oliver couldn't let it go. Just as Alice had done, he waited until Michael's workday was over, and when he came out of the store, he walked toward him. Hey, you. Let's go aside. We need to talk. Michael shrugged his shoulders and followed the major to this car. Oliver came to his car, leaned on it, and ostentatiously playing with the keys, looked threateningly into Michael's eyes. You know Alice? Well, this is my girlfriend. After these words, Michael immediately realized who was in front of him. Alice was telling him about her ex-boyfriend, with whom she had dated not seriously, out of boredom, and broke up immediately, barely meeting Michael. Ex-girlfriend, as far as I know, Michael smiled. You two broke up and now she's dating me. She's the one who thinks we broke up, but it's not up to her. I didn't break up with her. In fact, Alice is mad at me, so she's using you to make me jealous. When she cools off, we'll be fine. I don't think so, Michael countered. You don't get it. Oliver began to argue. If I ever see you around Alice again, I'll tear your legs off. Rip it out. Rip it out right now. What's stopping you? I'm telling you right now, I'm not giving up on Alice. You're a tough one, I see, Oliver shouted. and looked at his opponent appraisingly. Yeah, he'd probably lose to this guy in a direct confrontation. Michael was taller and shoulders taller, and judging by his gait, he's no stranger to sports. Oliver's favorite places to hang out were hookah joints and clubs. I warned you, make your conclusions, Oliver said through gritted teeth, retreating to the driver's door. I'm a man of my word. If I see you with Alice again, you'll be sorry, very sorry. But that's if you live. Wow, what threats, Michael laughed. I also repeat, I will not give up Alice. These words the guy said after the departing car, in which sat Oliver, seething with anger. Oliver was used to the fact that everything in life was easy for him, thanks to his father's money, and people, as a rule, always passed him up, seeing expensive clothes and a cool car. But those people are smart, Oliver thought. This one must be a fool. Fools are taught. Let him try not to listen to me. And it wasn't that Oliver needed Alice so much. He had plenty of girls like her, but his wounded ego called for action. After a couple days, Oliver was convinced that the salesman hadn't heeded his words and was still seeing Alice. Oliver sat in his car and watched them walk down the street holding hands. Anger boiled up inside. The guy already knew what he was going to do. Taking his gaze away from the couple annoying him, Oliver called one of his acquaintances. Leshy, hey, I've got a favor to ask you. You've got the contact info for these badass athletes. Yeah, they're the goon squad that do certain favors for money. Set me up with them. I got a good paying assignment for them. What do you care? I just need to teach a sucker a lesson. A good one. Oliver, in his car, was following Michael down a dark street. Michael had just seen Alice off to her house and had gone back on foot because the buses weren't running because of the late hour. He couldn't even call a cab, Oliver sneered, driving slowly. Oliver waited for Michael to enter the dark alley. In addition to the driver, there were 4 big, pumped-up guys of gangster appearance in the car. These guys were providing some services for a fee, and Steve went about them as completely badasses. We won't follow him for long, one of the jocks muttered. There's a good spot over there. He's about to make a turn and stop. We'll book him there. But let's talk terms right away. How do we take the guy down? Like cold turkey? Don't do the whole thing, Oliver shuddered. Just break his legs, that's all. Well, maybe he could spend the rest of his life in a wheelchair. Deal, said the jock, pulling his balaclava over his face. Keep in mind, if this guy points you out, forget about us. When they take you for one place, you better not even think about us. I can't be taken for this place, Oliver said pathetically. Do you know who my father is? We've heard, the jock muttered through gritted teeth. All right, client's turn stopped. Michael walked home happy, thinking about Alice. How'd he like this girl? At first, he thought that Alice is a major, but she turned out to be not spoiled by money and easy to communicate. At least in front of Michael, the girl never boasted of wealth and gladly went with Michael to the movies, walked around the city, visited inexpensive caves. And although Michael clearly felt their social inequality, still in the depths of his soul, he had a hope that they could do something. After all, the young people did not want to part in the evenings. Michael was walking with a slight smile on his lips when out of the darkness a big guy with a bat in his hand stepped toward him. His face was not visible, as it turned out later, not only because of the darkness, he was wearing a balaclava. At first, Michael didn't even get excited, thinking that he was mistaken for someone else. But then a man's voice sounded behind him, which seemed vaguely familiar. Well, we've met, just as I promised. Michael turned sharply to look at the man who was speaking. It was Alice's ex-boyfriend, who had threatened him a few days ago. Don't say I didn't warn you, Oliver grinned. I keep my word. Georgia was working the night shift, and it was business as usual, except that Michael wasn't returning her calls. That made the woman a little worried. Her son didn't call back after a while, as he always did. Georgia calmed herself with the thought that Michael must have fallen asleep after a long day at work. He still managed to go out with his new girlfriend after work. Georgia did not approve of the relationship, having learned that the girl was from a wealthy family. The woman thought that such relationships could not lead to anything good, but let them sort it out themselves. Georgia was especially upset in the morning, although the time was still early, but usually Michael had already gotten up for work. Not only had he never called back, but his phone was unavailable. The woman had barely waited until the end of her shift and was about to run home when she was called from her post. "Georgia, can you drop off the case histories at the emergency room on the way?" "Yeah, sure," Georgia nodded, grabbing the papers. "I'll do it. It's no problem." The woman went down in the elevator, and her heart clenched with a bad feeling. Already heading for the exit, she caught herself and rushed to the waiting room. There at that moment, they were carrying a patient from the ambulance on a stretcher. Imagine, a very young guy. They found him when it started to get light. We don't know how long he'd been lying there. He was beaten up, badly beaten. "We need to get him to intensive care," the paramedic from the ambulance told the emergency room nurses. Georgia herself didn't know what force made her, approach the stretcher and look into the face of the beaten boy. Her heart stopped beating. Her eyes were covered with a veil. The woman fainted right in front of the stretcher. "What's wrong with her?" The paramedic was surprised. "That's the nurse from surgery, right?" "Yeah, that's Georgia." She looked at the guy and collapsed right away. "Must be someone she knows. What if it's... Oh my God, she told me she had a son that age. God forbid." Georgia came to her senses on the couch where the nurses had moved her. She remembered everything right away. The guy they brought in the ambulance. "He's in the ICU, Georgia. Do you know him?" Georgia jumped up off the couch and rushed out of the emergency room. "It must be her son. I'm not mistaken," the nurse muttered. What a grief. Even though Georgia was a nurse, they wouldn't let her in the emergency room, no matter how hard she tried. "We're gonna do everything we can to help your son, and you don't need to see him right now. Believe me, there's nothing you can do to help him now. Here, take his things for now." The doctor put a bag of clothes in one hand and Michael's cell phone in the other. Georgia accepted it and absently pressed the power button. The phone, beeping merrily, blinked with a lighted screen. The screensaver showed his face pressed against the girl's cheek. There she is, his Alice, Georgia thought. Wow, how much did my son talk about her, and he never bothered to show a picture. Then numerous social media messages from this Alice girl simultaneized on the screen. "Michael, where are you? Where are you? Why aren't you answering?" Georgia clicked on one of these messages and found herself on the girl's page. What an interesting status she had. "My favorite is the best in the world." Did she write that about Michael? Swallowing back tears, Georgia thought. Maybe this girl actually loves him. I'll have to tell her what happened, but later, when my son comes to his senses. And Michael must come to his senses. Otherwise, there's no reason for me to go on living. My son is the only thing that makes sense in my life. I've already lost my beloved husband once, but then there was Michael and there was something to live for. The girl Alice apparently saw that Michael was online and sent a bunch of new messages urging him to answer her. Georgia flipped down the screen. Alice's pictures flashed up. There she was at home. Yes, this girl is not a poor girl. Yeah, and here she was, apparently with her parents. Georgia fixed her eyes on the face of Alice's mother. The phone fell out of her hands. The woman slowly slid down the wall, passing out for the second time that day. Diana and her husband were having dinner. It was one of those rare evenings when John came home early and Diane herself had no plans. The couple ate in silence. It had been a long time since they'd had a common topic of conversation. Diana didn't want to know how her husband was doing at work, and he wasn't interested in how his wife spent her time. Their only common topic was their daughter. After a long silence, John asked Michael a question. "Where are we with Alice? I don't see her that much lately. Where is she?" "How should I know?" The wife shrugged her shoulders. "She doesn't report to me. Probably out with her boyfriend." "What boyfriend, Oliver?" "You're out of touch with life," Diana snorted. "Our daughter broke up with Oliver. She's got another friend of her heart now. She hasn't brought him home, and something's gone wrong there, judging by how nervous Alice has been the last few days." "How is it, Diane? You stay at home and you don't talk to your daughter at all. No matter where you ask, you never know where she is. I realize she's a big girl, but not so big that you can't control her." "Does she let herself be controlled?" Diana exclaimed indignantly. "Tomka is like a prickly hedgehog, snapping at you when you ask her anything. She only snaps at you. And that's what I don't understand, because you're her mother. You're supposed to be close. but you're the opposite." John did not have time to finish as a disheveled Alice burst into the dining room and began to shout at her mother. "Mom, what happened on the river 15 years ago? Tell me now." "Alice, are you out of your mind?" John frowned. "Why do you let yourself yell at your mother? And what's the matter with you anyway? What's that look? Did you get into a fight with someone?" John noticed a bright red scratch on his daughter's cheek. "I wasn't in a fight, Dad. A complete stranger tried to beat me up." Alice plopped down on a chair and grabbed a glass of water from the table and began to drink greedily. Frowning, John looked at his daughter and waited for her to get drunk and explain to him what was going on. "I'll tell you everything first, Dad," said the girl, seeing her father's tense look. "I'm seeing a guy right now. His name is Michael. He's nice, very nice. He's a part-time graduate student, and he's working so he can help his mother. She raised him alone. Michael always spoke only warmly of his mother. I love Michael, Dad, I really do. It's not just a childhood crush anymore. 3 days ago, he disappeared, stopped contacting me. I couldn't breathe at the thought that he might have left me. I really couldn't breathe without him. Every day I went to the store where he works, but the employees didn't know anything. Michael just disappeared, never showed up for work. And just today, one of the clerks found out what really happened to Michael. He was beaten up on the street and he's still in intensive care. I found out what hospital he was in and I ran straight there. And his mom was there. Dad, you have no idea what happened. She attacked me in the hospital hallway. At first, I thought the woman was crazy. She wanted to scratch my eyes out. I couldn't understand how a person who didn't know me could lash out at me with such hatred. But she didn't do it silently, she screamed. Screaming that I was the curse of her life, that 15 years ago she lost her beloved husband, his father, because of me. And now Michael had been beaten up, again because of me. When the nurses pulled this woman away from me, I started screaming too. I yelled at her, "You're crazy. I've never met you before. Why do you think Michael was beaten because of me? And what does your husband have to do with it? Ask your mother. Let her tell you how 15 years ago my husband gave his life for someone else's child on the river. For you. Your mother was too drunk and partying to watch her own daughter. Michael's mom told me to get out of the hospital and never dare go near her son again. And I love Michael, and I'm not going to listen to her. I don't know how badly he was beaten, but if he dies, I die with him. Now I ask you, Mom, so what happened on that river 15 years ago, and why does that woman hate me so much?" Diana sat there, neither dead nor alive. She straightened in her chair like a taut string, and the woman's eyes darted from her husband to her daughter. Diana realized what she had feared for so long had happened, and then she relaxed. Time had passed, all was forgotten. That's what Diana thought. And it turned out that's how the truth came out. The woman rolled with a nervous laugh. "I don't know what you're talking about, Alice. This is really crazy." "I don't think so," said a pale John. "For some reason, I remembered the story on the river very well. A man drowned there, saving someone else's child. Why do I remember it? Because at the time I thought a lot about that man's selflessness. I even gave his widow money as financial aid through other people. But what makes her think it's you, Alice? She's deluded. Maybe you look like that girl. Maybe someone put it in her head." "Okay." John got up from the table abruptly. "Now you and I are gonna go with her, and we're gonna get to the bottom of this." Yes, let's go, Daddy," Alice nodded often. "Tell that crazy woman that she is wrong. And I want to see Michael. I want to know what's wrong with him." "You don't have to go anywhere," Diana shrieked. "You've already realized that this woman is not in her right mind. Apparently, she's a disturbed woman." Diana faltered at the suspiciously angry look her husband gave her and realized that the seed of doubt had already been planted in him. Georgia was sitting on the couch in the nurse's lounge, drinking valerian. "Georgia, what are you doing?" A nurse she knew said with horror. "Why are you so hard on that girl? I thought you were going to tear her hair out. Is this really the girl who drowned your Steve?" "Well, even if it wasn't the girl's fault." "Guilty as charged," exhaled Georgia, who had become a little sluggish under the sedatives. "My son was beaten up because of that girl. I lost my husband because of her. I hate her and her mother. I hate them so much. Why did they come into our lives and become a curse on our family?" An orderly came barreling into the nurse's room and looked at Georgia warily and said, "Georgia, there's this. A man's here with the girl you've been roughing up. Apparently it's her father, and he insists on talking to you. They weren't allowed into the station, of course. They're waiting for you downstairs in the visiting room. Let me tell him you're sick and can't come out. This guy's very solid. Probably wants to confront you for beating up his daughter." "What? You think I'm afraid of them?" Georgia jumped up. "After what's happened to me in this life, I'm not afraid of anything or anyone. The worst has already happened. But Michael is still alive," said the nurse timidly. "Yes, my son is alive. And to keep him alive, I must keep him away from this family." Georgia jumped up from the couch and ran past the nurse and the frightened nurse. "Don't let anything happen again," the nurse muttered. "What if there's a fight? Georgia's probably not in her right mind. I've been working with Georgia for years, and I'll never forget what happened to her when her husband drowned. Then she was all about Michael, living for her son, and here she is again. And it's all because of this family. It's like a fate, really." Jonah and Alice. Georgia came down, seemingly calm. They had no way of knowing it was the sedatives they'd given her in the nurse's station. The drugs had given Georgia a certain lethargy, but her gaze still flashed with rage when she saw Alice sitting on a bench next to a stout man. John intercepted that look and jumped up from his seat, blocking his daughter. "Your name is Georgia, and you beat my daughter. I'm not going to return the favor. I think you were acting in a state of shock. I take it this is all about a story from 15 years ago on the river. Only tell me, what makes you think Alice is the girl who drowned? You're deluded. Am I mistaken?" Laughed Georgia bitterly. "Do you really think that I saw a resemblance to that child in Alice and threw myself at her because of that? I didn't. I just recognized who her mother was. You're dying I'll remember for the rest of my life. What are you doing here, messing with me? You can't be ignorant of that story. I've heard of that story, and I admire your husband, but I never imagined it would happen to my girl. If you're right, my wife hid everything from me. Tell me exactly what happened." "What happened? Your dying got drunk with a friend and 2 guys and didn't watch your daughter. The girl fell off a cliff. Steve and I were on our way home when panic set in. My husband jumped in after your baby. He knew about the vortex, and he warned me repeatedly not to go near it. Steve knowingly sacrificed himself for a chance to save someone else's daughter. Then I came to your house to ask for money for the funeral, alone, but your wife treated me like a beggar, reprimanded me, and said that no one asked my husband to jump. It was his own fault." "She couldn't have said that," John shrieked. "Diana is far from perfect, but she's not that cynical. I see you don't know who you're living with, and you don't know what goes on in your own home. How can you not know that your child almost drowned? You're a bad family. You're a rotten family. Steve and I had a real one. We loved each other, and after he died, life became a struggle to survive. Your daughter's living the good life. She's a beautiful, spoiled brat. But my son is in intensive care because of her. I don't know if he's gonna make it." "What do you mean you don't know? Michael could die." Alice cried from behind her father's back. "And why me? Why are you blaming me for everything?" "Because your ex-boyfriend beat up Michael with the help of some thugs. His name is Oliver." Michael regained consciousness and told the coroner everything. "Oliver? Oliver did it? Are you sure?" John was surprised. "I know his father well. A lot of people know his father, believe me." And the investigator's eyes glazed over when he heard that name. "It's already clear that Oliver won't be held accountable for anything." "He will," John said imperiously, looking intently into George's eyes. "If he's guilty, he will, I give you my word. His father is a powerful man, of course, but I'm not the last man in this town. I'll do my best, but Oliver will be held accountable, and someone else will, and we'll see you again." John said the last words as he walked toward the door, dragging his daughter by the hand. Alice was crying. Why did you say that Michael might not survive?" She looked back at Georgia. That was all the girl cared about at that moment. Diana sat in the living room, all tense and ready for the upcoming conversation. It seemed to her that she was ready. Well, after all, it had been so many years. She was young and foolish. John must discount that. As her husband whirled into the house and opened his mouth, Ready to unleash the full force of his anger on his wife's head, she prevented him from doing so by speaking first. I get it, you found out. You are aware that it was Alice, that she was the one who drowned in the river. So, yes, I made a mistake going to the river, but that was a long time ago. I would have told you back then. But do you remember how you acted? How do you blame that negligent mother you said you had, not knowing it was me? And I was right. John roared. I still think so. Neglectful, you put it mildly. I think much worse of you. You've never been a normal mother, and I've put up with you all my life for my daughter's sake. And now it turns out our daughter might not be alive if it weren't for a stranger, and all because of you. What are you talking about? Diane is boiling. He tolerates me, and I don't? Or do you think life with you is easy? You're never home. How many times have we been away together? I can count on my fingers. You think that's life? Well, as far as I'm concerned, you're living life to the fullest. Or do you really think I don't know about your young lovers? I just didn't care. I don't care about you, Diane. About you or how you spend your time. As long as you don't bother me. I didn't divorce you so I wouldn't traumatize my daughter. Then there's that damn disease, your infertility. I'd be a bastard to divorce you, leaving a sick wife. So I put up with it. I haven't felt anything for you for a long time, and I don't care if you're going out. But now that I know you almost killed a child, lying to me and shitting on the soul of Steve's widow who turned to you. You're such an asshole, Diane. I don't want to see you another day. You realize this is the end of our married life together. Diane was furious, realizing that nothing could be done now, and John would divorce her anyway. She wanted to hurt him too. So be it. Go ahead and divorce him. I'll tell you what, you're not only a horny deer, you're a dumbass. You say you live with me because I'm infertile? I'm not infertile. I didn't want to have a baby. I didn't want to nurse those little snotty babies. And I didn't care that you wanted a son. So you had to settle for just a daughter. John squinted angrily at his wife and unexpectedly for her, laughed. Do you think you've trampled me now? Don't get your hopes up. Yes, I felt sorry for you and believed you, so I did not leave you. But I wasn't gonna give up my kids because of you. I've got a second family with 2 kids growing up. The oldest is 10 years old, and now I won't even wait for an official divorce from you. I'll bring them here as soon as you leave the house. And you'll be out of the house fast, and I'll talk to Alice. I don't think she'll want to go with you. You're such a bad mother. Your daughter will never support you. Diane was trying to play nice and get a divorce. I've been wanting to do that for a long time. I won't be alone either. And in the divorce, I'll take half of everything you own. It's not gonna work, Diane. You're gonna walk away with your ass naked. You think because you've been cheating on me for so long, I haven't taken care of it. You signed the papers without realizing it, and you get nothing in the divorce. That can't be. Diana shrieked. You bastard. I didn't sign anything. And if you did, I'll hire a lawyer to prove that you did it all by deception. What are you gonna hire a lawyer for, Diane? It takes good money to hire a good lawyer. Now who has more money, you or me? You know, when I slicked you those papers to sign, I wasn't really planning on using them, just in case. And now I realize you're being punished. It's a little punishment for being such a scumbag. Oliver was rocking out in the club to the rhythmic sounds of loud music when 2 men in civilian clothes approached him, quickly waving a crust in front of the guy's face. One of them threw, "You're under arrest." Oliver was a little stoned, and he found himself laughing eerily. "I'm in custody. Do you even know who you're talking to? Do you know who my father is?" We know, muttered one of the cops, roughly pushing Mitri into the duty car. "We know everything, all questions to the superiors." It was necessary to see the confusion on Oliver's face when he realized that what was happening was not a joke, not a prank of friends, and he was really being taken to the station, knowing who his father was. The next morning, a confused secretary came into John's office. "John, there's a man here to see you. I told him you were busy." "Get out of the way," rudely pushed the girl away, a full, balding man in an expensive suit, bursting into the office. "Hello, John. I'll get right to the point. My son was arrested yesterday. Can you believe it? Oliver was arrested right in the club." "I know," John replied, making no attempt to stand up, and offered his hand to his old acquaintance. "You know, don't you?" The man frowned. "And I thought it wasn't true when I was told that this arrest had its roots in you. It's true, Archie. Your son brutalized a guy and he's gonna be held accountable for it. Who said that? The big man got all worked up. Who's the boy? It was just a fight over a girl. Your daughter, by the way. But that guy's nobody and his name's nobody. I don't get it, John. Do you have a personal grudge against me? No, it's nothing personal. It's just that the guy's not a stranger to me. Consider it that. Who is he to you? Archie's confused. Is he so close to you that you're going to fight with me over him? Very close. I'm ready to fight if I have to. John got up from the table. You know, it's just that whoever has the most money is right. In this case, you lose. I'm not doing anything illegal, and your son will be held fully accountable for what he did. And he's going down. You want to fight me, Archie? Believe me, I'll go all the way. Sweat beaded on the big man's bald head. He'd known John for years and knew that when he said he'd go all the way, he'd go all the way. Archie knew the man's stubbornness firsthand, and Archie knew John's capabilities too. John, come on, really. We've known each other for years too. What's he gonna do? Go to jail? It's not that big a deal. Maybe he'll get off on probation. He won't, John said meaningfully. It'll be what the court says it will be. By the law at this time. Oliver's not your only son, is he? What would it be like for the other two if Dad went bankrupt? Even so, Archie squinted at him. Even so, John cut him off. At the same time in the hospital, under the door of the intensive care unit, Georgia was sobbing. The doctor had recently told her the terrible news. Michael's kidneys were failing. He needs a transplant. Of course, he will be put on a waiting list for a donor organ, but Georgia has worked in medicine for too long and knew perfectly well what the chance of waiting for that waiting list is. Mine, take mine, Georgia shouted without hesitation. The doctor nodded, as if knowing her mother's reaction in advance. Yes, it is possible in principle. Let's go through the necessary examination, and we will make sure that your organ is suitable for transplantation. And so, a few minutes ago, the doctor said that her kidney is not suitable. As she wept, Georgia tried to pull herself together, stop crying, and find a solution. Something had to be done. Michael could go on for hours. She of all people should know that. The woman straightened up, wiped her tear-stained eyes, and only then saw Alice peeking out from around the corner leading to the emergency room. Brave fool, thought the woman. Have you come again? Did I not clearly tell you not to show your face here anymore? Kill me. Alice took a step out of the corner. Kill me. Pull out all my hair. I'll still come here. I've been standing here a long time and I heard you talking to the doctor. Michael needs a kidney transplant and yours isn't a match. Take mine. I'm ready. Georgia looked carefully at the excited, covered with red spots girl. Dummy, do you realize what you're proposing? It's not an easy surgery. Anything can happen when you take a donor organ. You could die. But even if everything goes well, you'll only have one kidney, and that's not a full life. Do you realize that? I'm not as stupid as you think I am. I understand the risks. Even if I die, I'm okay with it. No, that's not the right word. I don't agree. I insist. I would rip a kidney out of myself just to keep Michael alive. When I think he might be gone, I don't want to live. Georgia looked at Alice thoughtfully, as if seeing her for the first time. You stupid girl, you don't understand anything yet. You're a minor and you don't have the right to decide such things. Maybe, I admit, you really love my son, but I can't do anything about my dislike for you. Alice flew out of the hospital like scalded and threw herself on the roadway, blocking the way of a yellow car with a checkered flag. The cab driver braked sharply, almost touching the girl standing on the road with his bumper. He jumped out and attacked her, almost with fists. What are you doing, you crazy girl? You're sick of living. Go throw yourself off the bridge. What do I have to do with it? Alice didn't listen to him. She ran to the passenger door, opened it, and got into the car. I need you to take me downtown now. I'm not getting out of the car. Take me. I have to go to my father's office. The cab driver was already eyeing the unstable passenger with apprehension. Either she was crazy or this girl had something happen, and it was serious. The man silently got behind the wheel and turned the car around. John's secretary had only recently come to her senses after a visit from a man who had roughly pushed her, and then Alice burst in and raced to the door of her father's office. Your daddy doesn't have time. "He has a meeting," the secretary shouted at her back. Alice flew into the office and, not paying attention to several respectable men sitting at a long table, shouted, "Daddy, you have to authorize me to donate a kidney to Michael." "Well," John said angrily, "I didn't raise you well, daughter. Don't you notice anything around you? You don't see people sitting around, and you barge in. Go out to the waiting room and wait there." "No, Dad, this case can't wait. Michael could die." "Okay, got it," Dad sighed heavily. He turned to his staff. "Would you mind leaving us? The meeting is adjourned. Sorry, family matters." The men rose at the same time and, looking disapprovingly at the chief's ill-mannered daughter, left the office. "I'm listening to you carefully, Alice. What happened there?" "I was at the hospital. Michael's kidneys are failing. He needs an emergency transplant. His mom's kidney isn't a match. He has to wait in line, and he might not get it, you know? I'm young, I'm healthy, I can easily live with one kidney. But I'm a minor, you have to sign the authorization." "That's out of the question." John cut him off. Alice screamed. She screamed and screamed, not noticing that her father was sitting with his hand on his head, not paying any attention to his daughter, thinking carefully about something. "Shut up, Alice," he finally said, raising his head at Alice. "I already told you. You won't be Michael's donor, I will be. If my kidney is a match, of course. But somehow I think it will. It has to be. Michael's father gave his life for you, and I'm only giving a kidney for his son's life." Diane stalked her daughter outside the school. It's not the first time a woman's done that. And it wasn't because she missed Alice. She needed the money. Of course, Diana left her husband's house not completely empty-handed, and she had money and jewelry in sufficient quantity. But she had moved in with a young and voracious lover. Voracious not in terms of food, but in terms of needs. Having got in touch with Diana, the guy was used to living large and was not going to moderate his appetites. Moreover, now Diana lives on his territory, although he did not ask her to do so. Diana's money ran out lightning fast, and the young friend began to hint that he was not going to provide for a grown-up aunt. And they had no obligations, they met only for pleasure. Diana felt humiliated, but she had nowhere to go, so she turned to her daughter for the first time. Alice, quite predictably, decided to stay with her father. Alice had money. Her father was never stingy when it came to his favorite daughter, and she had given it to her mother several times. But the money was running out fast. "Alice, hello." Diana waved her hand from the ajar window of the car John had generously allowed her to take. "I missed you. Come on, get in the car." Alice sighed sadly and separated from the flock of girlfriends with whom she came down from the school porch. The girl walked towards her mother's car. "I don't have any money," was the first phrase of the girl when she sat down next to Diana. "What? No money right away?" Her mother pouted. "Can't I just visit my daughter?" "I said I missed her." "Don't lie to me, Mom. You never missed me. In fact, you didn't need me. I realize that now. You came for money, and I don't have any." "Why not?" Diane raised her eyebrows. "What, did your daddy turn his attention to his new kids? And you don't get anything from him?" "That's not the point, Mom. Whether I get money from my father or not is none of your business. I don't have any more money for you. I know you didn't leave home empty-handed, and I know who you've blown it on. Don't come to see me again." "Look, what arrogance!" Diana curled her lips. "And this is my daughter talking to me. Your father, too, such a hero, gave his kidney to some guy. The whole town's talking about it. It's all over the social media. Obviously, it's a PR stunt. After that, he's probably making a lot of money. But that he kicked his wife out of the house and brought in a second family, the story doesn't tell. How do you like living with your new family? How do you like your brothers?" "They're normal brothers," Alice said, "and their mom is normal, even though she looks like a model, but she's homely, running around, looking at daddy's mouth. Maybe he originally needed such a one. Maybe your marriage was a mistake, and maybe I shouldn't have been born. Then Michael would have a father. And I'm nothing but trouble." If Diana had been an attentive mother, she would have noticed that her daughter was depressed, but she didn't care about Alice. She was frantically thinking about how to go on living, and on what? Without money, her lover would obviously kick her out. He had made that clear. Alice didn't care about her mother's worries either. With a loud slam of the car door, she jumped out and ran to catch up with her friends. She didn't want to go home. It was true that her father had a new family, and not that Alice had anything against them. She understood everything because she was a grown-up girl, but it just became unusual in the house. Alice felt superfluous, and maybe not even in the house, maybe in this life. And everything seemed to be fine. Not so long ago, Alice was so happy when the kidney transplant operation on Michael was successful, and it became clear that the guy will live. John, who had donated his organ, was also feeling fine. He had already been discharged from the hospital. And with Michael, everything was more complicated. He was still lying, but, as the doctor said, was on the mend. And Alice found out through her father. Georgia did not let Alice near her son and forbade the girl to go near the hospital. "I am grateful to your father, but together with Michael you cannot be," said Georgia. "You bring only unhappiness." And Alice believed in these words. The girl actually began to feel that way. She sank into a severe depression. She didn't want to do anything at all, neither to go home, nor to go out with her friends. Why nothing though? She wanted to be with Michael, but that was impossible. John was working in his office. Doctors, after discharge, strongly advised bed rest, but the man felt normal for a long time. He tried not to go to the office yet. He did things from home. The man did what he promised Diane he would do. Right after he kicked her out of the house, he brought his second family here, having talked to Alice beforehand. The boys were happy, and Kendall, their mom, was blowing John away. She never entered his office without knocking, afraid to disturb him while he was working. So now, there was a scraping at the massive door, and Kendall's head appeared. "John, Alice's friend is here to see you. She wants to talk to you. Would you like to come out to the living room, or should I bring her in here?" "Send her in here. There's probably boys walking around on their heads in the living room." "That's just the way it is," Kendall smiled. A couple minutes later, Alice's close friend, Alfia, entered Jonah's office. "Hello," she said with embarrassment. "Alice doesn't know about my visit to you, and you don't tell her or she'll be offended. I'm worried about her." "What's wrong, Alfia?" "I can see Alice is sad, but it's because of Michael. His mom won't let them see each other anymore. Alice will get sad and forget him." "Sad? Forgetful?" exclaimed Alfia. "I wouldn't call it that. Do you know that your daughter climbs to the roof of an unfinished high-rise and stares down for hours? What do you think she's thinking at that moment? I'm really scared for Alice. She's got it in her head that she's bringing misfortune to others, and she doesn't want to live without Michael. At first, I thought it was just a crush and she'd forget him, but it's not. Alice loves this guy, really loves him. We have to do something. I'm afraid for Alice." After the girl said that, John was worried. He didn't realize his daughter's feelings for Michael were so serious. Georgia took her son's things out of the hospital bedside table and put them neatly into bags. "Finally, we're coming home with you, son. I made you some pies with cabbage, just the way you like them," the woman chattered on. Michael was gloomy, and his mother knew why. Alice. From the very beginning, as soon as the boy came to his senses, Georgia had told him she wouldn't let him date Alice and told him why. "You want me dead? Go ahead. He've seen this girl. Step over your mother." These were the words with which the woman ended her speech. She was not affected even by the fact that John donated his kidney to Michael and the fact that the man opened a large money account in the name of her son. The money, by the way, the woman refused for a long time and was about to give it back to John. That's when their first serious conversation happened. "This is a small part of what I have to do for you. Steve gave his life, and I just gave a kidney. Of course, money won't bring your husband and father back to you, but Georgia, think about it. Wouldn't Steve have made that money if he were alive? And whose fault is he not? That's just it. I want Michael to get a college degree full-time and not work like he does now. And you, stop scrubbing floors in your hospital. It's time for a vacation. Michael will graduate, and if he has the brains, start his own business. He'll have some startup capital. Let me do at least that for you." Georgia thought long and hard. Then she got it out. "Okay, we'll take the money. Let Michael have a chance at a normal future. Not like mine. But I'm not gonna let him see Alice anyway." "That's your right," John shrugged, taking youthful relationships lightly. Georgia and her son walked out of the hospital gates, and Michael breathed in the fresh air he had missed in the hospital room. At that time, a huge SUV pulled up beside them. John jumped out of the car and grabbed the bags from Georgia's hands. "Get in the car and I'll give you a ride," he said. "We'll take the bus," Georgia stubbornly argued. The man, not listening to the objections, literally pushed them into his car. A little way from the hospital, he turned into the first parking lot he could find. He turned off the engine and half turned around to look at Michael in the back seat. "So, Michael, how do you feel about my daughter?" "I love her," he answered without a second thought. "I see," John stretched out. "Then why did you put up with your mom's band?" Michael hesitated, then, lowering his eyes, mumbled, "I didn't." "What?" Georgia shrieked from the front seat. She, too, turned to look at her son. "What do you mean you haven't gotten over it?" "Michael, what are you talking about?" "Mom, look, all I can think about all the time is Alice. I understand, and I don't want to upset you, but I can't stop thinking about her. I was going to see Alice, to talk to her. If she's okay with our breakup, then well." "She hasn't," John shouted. "She's very much not okay with it. So much so that she's thinking of jumping off the roof. And I got that from a friend of hers." "Georgia, you're a reasonable adult. What are you doing? Let the young people decide their own fate. They're not to blame for our sins. The more we interfere with them now, the more they'll be drawn to each other. They'll run away if it's not their destiny, but we shouldn't decide that for them. If my daughter jumps off the roof, what then? Your Steve will have died for nothing, giving his life for her. Georgia, wake up." Georgia was almost crying. "Why are you making a monster out of me? I reconsidered my attitude toward Alice when she wanted to give her kidney, but I'm afraid. I have a crazy fear." Michael put his hand on his mother's shoulder and smiled. "Don't be afraid, Ma. Everything is definitely going to be okay now. All the skeletons are out of the closets and only happiness lies ahead." A week later, two young people came to the cemetery, a guy and a girl. The girl had a huge bouquet of scarlet roses in her hands. "Here he is, my dad," said the guy, stopping near one of the graves. A young man with an open, friendly face looked at the girl from the monument. "Thank you," whispered Alice, placing the flowers on the grave. "Thank you for my life and for Michael."
Georgia was lying in bed, and she didn't feel like sleeping at all. She took her phone from the nightstand and flipped through the pictures of them together with Alex. Yes, the people around them were right when they said that they were a beautiful couple. The girls were chasing Alex, and Georgia had a lot of admirers, but she'd never dated anyone but Alex. He paid attention to the girl as soon as she finished 9th grade, and Georgia disappeared, drowning in the pool of his black eyes. Alex was 3 years older than the girl, and Georgia's friends were always talking about him, saying that he was going out and that he had a couple of 3 girls besides Georgia. But Georgia didn't believe it. She knew her lover was being slandered out of envy. And there was plenty of envy around. The couple overcame everything and now a year, as they lived together in the apartment, which Alex inherited from his grandmother. Georgia was still in school. The girl was finishing the last course in her 19 years, and Alex was looking for a job, while the guy worked part-time as a cab driver in his peril, which he had saved up for himself. He was still working. That's why Georgia was lying in bed alone, missing her lover. The girl was against his nighttime work, but Alex assured her that nighttime was always the night with the most money. At night, he often drove drunk people around who were not stingy on tips. And Georgia was also confused by the fact that lately Alex had been having a few drinks with his clients and often got behind the wheel drunk. "It's only for a while," the girl frowned, "until he gets caught." Although, every time Georgia caught a whiff of alcohol from her boyfriend, he assured her it was an emergency and wouldn't happen again. "Let's hope so," smiled Georgia, glancing at one of the photos where Alex was particularly handsome. In it, he looked like an actor playing a superhero that saves the world. With this smile on her lips, she fell asleep, putting the phone on the empty pillow next to her. She was awakened by a rumble in the hallway. Someone had dropped a shoe rack on the floor. Georgia looked at the time on the phone lying next to her. 3 o'clock in the morning. That was odd. Usually Alex didn't come back until the morning when he left for the night shift. And was it even him? Startled, Georgia jumped out of bed and, throwing on a light negligee, gingerly looked out of the bedroom. It was Alex, but she had never seen him like this before. He stood firmly on his feet. But his eyes were as if they were insane. The guy looked at his friend, and as if he couldn't see her, couldn't focus his gaze. "Alex, what's wrong with you?" The girl exclaimed. "Are you drunk again?" "A little bit, just a little bit." "It's not alcohol, it's different." "What's different?" Georgia was horrified. "Alex, what is it, drugs?" "I'm a fool, I know. One of my clients suggested I try a pill, and it just blew my mind. I'll never, ever again. Georgia, I'm a fool," mumbled incoherently as he began to undress in the hallway. Eventually, he threw off all his clothes. "Alex, what are you doing? Let me get your stuff." Don't take anything." The guy sharply dismissed Georgia, who had already bent down to pick up a pile of things thrown on the floor. "It's all in the wash. Right now in the wash. Who does laundry at night? I'll drop it off in the morning. Why do you need it so bad?" "The customer was drunk and threw up on me." "Don't touch it. I'll put it in the car myself." Georgia was surprised by Alex's insistence, but she didn't interfere with the insane guy and stood with her arms folded across her chest, watching him shove all his stuff into the washer compartment and dump nearly half a pack of powder in there. "There's no use talking to him now," thought the girl. "I'll talk in the morning, seriously talk. This is getting out of hand. The pill he's tried." Georgia snorted unhappily and went to sleep. After a while, Alex fell asleep on the bed and instantly passed out. In the morning, when Georgia was going to school, Alex didn't wake up. She took all his clothes out of the washing machine and hung them neatly on the dryer. Before leaving, she peeked into the bedroom. The guy was asleep with his mouth ajar and drool dripping from the corner of his lips. The girl smiled. Despite all the quirks, she loved him so much. Georgia walked into the room and covered Alex with the blanket that had slipped down. "Let him sleep. We can talk later." However, when Georgia returned home from school, she didn't find Alex there, although his car was still parked near the entrance. This circumstance struck the girl. Alex never walked. He even went to the neighboring store for bread only by car. Georgia took a piece of frozen minced meat out of the freezer and put it in the microwave to defrost, deciding to make cutlets. She thought Alex was in the neighborhood and should be here any minute. But time passed, the cutlets were cooling in the pan, and the guy was still gone. When Georgia tried to call him, she found his phone lying in the bedroom next to the bed, as if accidentally dropped. The girl got nervous, and when her phone rang from an unfamiliar number, she grabbed it lightning fast. She was not mistaken, it was Alex, but his voice sounded strangely, unusually agitated. "Georgia, listen carefully. I don't have much time. I've been arrested. I'm innocent of what I'm accused of. I swear to you. You have to save me if you love me. When they ask you what time I came home last night, you must tell them I came home at 11 o'clock at night. You hear me, 11 o'clock. What happened?" "I don't understand anything," Georgia shouted into the phone. "What can you be accused of?" "Don't interrupt, listen to me. Just one more thing. Find some clothes I've already worn and hang them on a chair in the bedroom. If anyone asks, tell them I wore them last night." "Tell who? What's going on?" "You'll tell the police when they come to see you." "What the hell did you do? Is that why you washed your clothes last night?" "I explained to you why I was doing laundry. But in light of recent events, it might look suspicious and work against me. Georgia, trust me, please, please save me." The call was cut off abruptly, half-heartedly. Georgia stared unblinkingly at the phone, stunned. But she didn't have time to think. At the same second, the doorbell rang. She jumped up and rushed into the hallway, hoping that everything Alex had said would be a prank and that he would be standing at the door, laughing and, preferably, with a bouquet of flowers. Why didn't he open the door with his own key, though? Georgina's hand froze in midair as she was about to swing the door open, and she used the peephole for the first time in a long time. There were several policemen on the landing, and one of them was ringing the neighbor's doorbell. The girl's heart raced. What had Alex said about what time he got back? What about the clothes? Georgia rushed into the bathroom. There, from the basket with dirty laundry, the girl took out the jeans and sweater already worn by Alex, and running into the bedroom, hung them on the chair next to the bed. The doorbell was already ringing very insistently, and Georgia was taking her boyfriend's clothes from the dryer, which had had time to dry. Only then did Georgia open the door. Uniformed men piled into the apartment, leading two senior citizens from the apartment across the hall. Interrogators. For some reason, Georgia immediately realized, though she had never encountered such a thing. A paper was shoved in the girl's face. She didn't have time to read anything on it, and the apartment was searched. Then Georgia was asked what time her roommate came home. 11 o'clock at night, squeaked the girl. Are you sure? Raised his eyebrows at the young man in civilian clothes. I'm absolutely sure. We watched TV and went to bed at 12. Georgia hadn't expected herself to be such a vigorous liar. Alex's voice was always in her head, begging her to save him. When she was asked what clothes Alex had been wearing yesterday, she pointed her finger at the sweater and jeans she had taken out of the dirty laundry basket a few minutes before. The next day, first thing in the morning, Georgia was sitting in the office of the same young man who had interviewed her in the apartment during the search. She realized that he was the investigator in charge of the case. But what kind of case? Can you finally explain to me what you're accusing Alex of? What happened? You don't know yet? The investigator was surprised. Wow. Are you living in isolation? The whole town is buzzing about this tragedy, about the 11-year-old girl who was found. The same girl? Georgia was horrified. The one who was murdered last night? Yes, she'd been strangled and abused. She was found on the outskirts of town, behind an abandoned stadium. When Georgia realized what the coroner was trying to charge her boyfriend with, she was kind of relieved. If Alex had been accused of killing someone in a drunken brawl, for example, then yeah, she'd think she was covering up for the killer. But here, a girl. Alex couldn't have done that, so George is doing the right thing by saving him. All the investigator has to do now is find someone to pin this case on. Georgia nervously grabbed a piece of paper from the desk and began to write a statement that Alex had come home at 11 o'clock at night and had never left the apartment. The elderly investigator looked with mute reproach at the bowed head of this beautiful girl, carefully choosing and writing words on paper. Are you sure of what you are doing? The man asked quietly. This girl, she's a child. Whoever did this to her is not a human being. It's a beast. That's right. Georgia was furious. That's exactly what I understand. Only a monster could do such a thing. What's Alex got to do with it? I'm telling you, he was home at 11 o'clock at night. What makes you think he had anything to do with it? I'll tell you why. This girl's mom is a nurse and she was on the night shift. As usual, she called a cab and put her daughter in the car. She herself personally escorted the cab driver to take the girl to her aunt's house, where Selena always slept over when her mom worked the night shift. It was 10 o'clock at night. The cab driver, as you yourself probably realized by now, was your Alex. He doesn't deny that, except he says he drove the girl to her destination. But she never made it to her aunt's driveway. At about 5 o'clock a.m., her body was discovered by a homeless guide who hangs around the abandoned stadium. He claims to have seen the prior pulling away from the stadium at 3:30 in the morning. Except the homeless man couldn't see the license plate number in the dark. Forensics says the girl was strangled after 2 o'clock a.m. and now, knowing all this, you're still going to say that Alex was home at 11 o'clock at night? Of course I will. Georgia was indignant. Listen to yourself. Alex put the girl in his car at 10 o'clock in the evening, and the crime was committed at 2 o'clock. How can you imagine that? What was he doing with her all that time? You don't want to know what he was doing, the investigator sighed. I wouldn't want to know it myself. I've worked in the police for a long time, but this is the first time in my practice. I'd rather retire than realize that such people walk the earth. Exactly. That's right. Georgia almost cried. They are. And my Alex is not like that. He's just a normal person. He has his faults, of course, but he's not a monster. He would never do something like that. There, I've written it all. I've written the truth. When will you release Alex? Well, the investigator curled his lips, running his eyes over the nervously written lines. We'll let him go soon, we'll have to. You provided an alibi for your Alex, but I advise you to think hard about perjury. There's no perjury. I wrote the truth. Let Alex go. Alex was released after lunch, and all this time Georgia did not leave the police building. She waited on a bench near the duty officer. As she sat there, she noticed a drunken black woman walking by with a loping gait, and having looked closely, I realized that the woman was not drunk at all. She was staggering from something else, and her face seemed black by association, as if blackened by grief. The woman was still young, a little over 30, and her beautiful blonde hair waved out from under a crookedly tied black scarf. Georgia didn't know why the word black came to mind when she saw her. Georgia had a suspicion who this woman, blackened with pain, Might be, and she wasn't wrong in her assumption. It so happened that Alex, accompanied by a policeman, came out to Georgia at the same time as that woman who came back from the depths of the building. When she saw the guy, she howled like a wounded she-wolf and threw herself at him, clawing at his hair. "Ooh," howled the woman, "it's you, it's you." The policeman accompanying Alex was barely able to tear her away from the guy, who looked around in a huff and made no attempt to defend himself. And the woman continued to rage, held by two policemen, as the doobie officer jumped out of his booth at the noise. Why is he leaving? Why are you letting him go? What are you doing?" The uniformed man tried to reason with the grief-stricken woman. It's not him. The cab driver had nothing to do with it. He was already home at 11:00 p.m. here. The girl confirms his alibi. It's not his fault. It can't be. I feel it. I know it's him. He did this to my little girl, howled the suffering mother. Alex, who came to his senses, grabbed Georgia's hand and quickly ran out of the police building with her. Once outside, Georgia noisily sucked in fresh air and for some reason asked Alex in a whisper, "Is that girl's mom?" "Yes." "Oh my God, what grief. But why is she thinking about you?" "Come on, let's go quickly. We'll talk at home." Still dragging Georgia by the hand, Alex, moving quickly down the street. They reached the house on foot without a single word until they entered the apartment. And already there, as soon as the door was shut behind them, Alex immediately fell on his knees and wrapped his arms around Georgia's legs, burying his face in them. "Georgia, it wasn't me. I swear to you, it wasn't me. Do you believe me?" "Of course I believe you," Georgia almost cried. "Otherwise, how could I confirm your alibi? Whoever did that to a child is not a human being. I've known you for years, lived with you, slept with you. You couldn't have done this. It was just a coincidence. And then there were your clothes, which you rushed to wash at night." Alex froze, his arms around Georgia tensed. "I told you why I was doing laundry. Do you doubt it?" "I'm telling you again, Alex, if I'd had any doubts at all, I wouldn't have written anything to the police. It's a shame. It's a shame for that girl and her mom. Did you see her suffer? But it's not about you and me," Alex said, rising to his feet. "We must forget this event like a terrible dream. I feel sorry for that poor woman too, but to accuse me only on the grounds that I gave her daughter a ride is stupid." Nevertheless, Alex decided not to go out taxiing for the time being, until the fuss died down in town. Georgia, on the other hand, had to go to school, where her classmates began to leer at her. Some wondered if Alex had actually been home that night. It was hard for Georgia to withstand the pressure, but it became even harder when, on her way home after school, she saw a familiar woman in a black scarf near her driveway. The girl wanted to rush past. She couldn't. The woman rushed toward Georgia, not letting her pass. It was a hard conversation, and the heavy gaze of a grief-stricken mother penetrating right into Georgia's soul. "What are you doing? Why are you covering up for my daughter's killer? He was only released based on your testimony." "Because it wasn't him. It's not him." Georgia was screaming hysterically. "I don't know." The woman stared hard at Georgia. "Whether you're covering for him willfully or not. If not intentionally, then I'm begging you, wake up, open your eyes." The woman didn't want to let go of Georgia, and her words became more and more threatening. The girl could barely break free and ran into her driveway. "Mom, we'll probably move out of this town. Alex has already filed an advertisement for the apartment," Georgia said without looking at her mother, and continued to roll out the dough for dumplings. The girl had been visiting her parents since morning, but she couldn't start this conversation. Georgia's mother froze, her hand stirring the mincemeat frozen in the air. "I don't get it. What do you mean you're moving? Where do you think you're going? What about your wedding? We've decided we're not getting married. We're going to get married, and that's it. No celebration. Alex got a good job offer, but it's in Washington. We're going there. What the hell is this? What do you mean you're leaving? What's going on? Is this about the whole dead girl thing? But it should be obvious to everyone that Alex couldn't have done it. He was with you at the time, wasn't he?" "Of course he was, Mom, but you can't prove it to people. Some people keep looking at us." Georgia really downplayed the problem. Squinting wasn't the right word. It was more like stalking. Georgia had graduated with all her friends gone. Her classmates wouldn't talk to her. And Alex's car, parked in the yard, was constantly smeared with shit and bad words written on it. Alex and Georgia understood why this was happening, because the dead girl's mom, Maria, kept telling everyone that Alex was the real killer and Georgia was covering for him. Georgia's mom didn't know all this. The girl didn't want to worry her parents with such stories. Georgia, I still don't understand. What, Washington? It'll all blow over. People will calm down. And the police, after all, have to find the real killer. They don't seem to be in any hurry to find him. Georgia sighed bitterly. And Washington's already taken care of, Mammy. I'm sorry, I'm only telling you now. Alex and I are going there as soon as we're married. We've already set up our first meeting with possible buyers for tomorrow. Don't worry, DC isn't far away. And we'll visit you. And you and Daddy will come visit us. All evening, making dumplings with her daughter, Georgia's mother tried to dissuade her from a rash act, but it was useless. A month later, the young couple got married, and only Georgia's parents and Alex's mom were present at the registry office. Neither friends nor girlfriends were there, and the same day the couple, who became husband and wife, left their hometown. They left to start from scratch, but not with empty pockets. They had money from the sale of an apartment and a car, so there should be no problems with housing. At the same time, in another part of the city, Maria, the dead girl's mother, was being processed for treatment in a psychiatric clinic. She was persuaded to go there by her own sister, fearing that the woman had begun to go mad. She spent all her free time at the cemetery, near her daughter's grave, and worst of all, she stayed there overnight. I can't go home. Selena is scared to stay here alone in the dark, Maria told her sister. And even more frightening was Maria's statement. I will kill Alex myself. People like him shouldn't walk the earth. What are you talking about? The police proved it wasn't the guy's fault. Of course, Selena had his marks on her body, but that can be explained. She was riding in his car before. Most importantly, the DNA didn't match Alex's. The killer's someone else. The investigator says he's looking for the real killer. Maria just chuckled at her sister's words. She knew for a fact that Alex was guilty. The woman remembered the evening when she walked her daughter to the cab. The driver had given the girl a carnivorous, inebriated look. Is he drunk? Thought Maria at the time. No, he can't be. He's driving. He must be imagining it. She dismissed the bad thoughts from her mind. Then she returned to the house and began to get ready for work, but the cab driver's gaze did not give her peace. The woman dialed her sister, to whom her daughter was on her way. Listen, go out to the entrance. Meet the cab car. I'm not feeling so good in my heart. Selena left in a Priora. The sister fulfilled Maria's request. She came down and stood near the entrance for a long time. And as she later claimed, no Priora had driven by. The cab driver claimed that he drove the girl, just for some reason, dropped her off at the corner of the house, as if Selena had asked him to do so. Maria was sure the cabbie was lying. She saw him as a beast in her heart. And when the woman told everyone she was going to kill Alex, she wasn't lying. She was preparing for it. Maybe she would have done it already, except Alex stopped leaving the house. Maria often sat hidden on the playground in the yard of his house. Only his girlfriend came out of the entryway. The woman looked at her and wondered whether she was covering for her boyfriend intentionally, and could not make up her mind. And then Maria went into a psychiatric hospital. This was taken care of by her sister, very worried about the mental state of a relative. Maria came out of there only after a few months. First, she went to the cemetery to her daughter, and then her feet led her to Alex's house. The familiar Priora wasn't in the driveway. Did he go out to work as a cab driver again? This can't be allowed, thought Marie. After sitting fruitlessly on the playground for several hours and seeing neither Alex nor his girlfriend, Maria went home, but the next day she came again. And only on the third day of her duty on the playground, the woman decided to approach some grandmother coming out of a familiar entrance. Hello, Maria addressed her politely. Do you happen to know Alex and Georgia? They live in this driveway. I know, why wouldn't I know, blared the grandmother with faded eyes. But you're too late, sweetheart. They sold the apartment a month ago. Really? Do you happen to know where they moved? Maria asked with a sinking heart. I know for sure that they moved to another city, but I can't tell you which one. I wasn't privy to such details. I only heard that Alex was offered a good job there. Maria walked down the street with an uncertain gait. Well, that's it. Alex's trail was lost. Where to look for him now? Or maybe it's for the best. Life will punish this guy if he's guilty. Marie needs to pull herself together and move on with her life. That's what the psychiatrist tried to tell her. She needs to get a job so she can be around people. Oh, and her sister's been pushing her to stay with her for a while, so she won't be alone. Should I take her up on her offer? While in the psychiatric hospital, Maria was a little angry with her sister. But on mature reflection, she realized that her sister only wished her well. Perhaps Maria herself would have done the same thing if she were in her sister's shoes. Her depression was worsening, threatening to spiral into dire consequences. Even now, after leaving the hospital, she'd come here to see Alex, but then life had decided she shouldn't have met him. Maria didn't go back to her house that night, where everything reminded her of her daughter. She went straight to her sister's. A few days later, she went to work. The sister began to think that Maria had coped with her grief, was able to pull herself together, although she continued to visit the cemetery and the police almost daily, as if to her home. The elderly investigator in charge of the case began to hide from Maria because he had nothing to say to her. The case remained unsolved. Georgia staggered from foot to foot, ducking her way around the apartment. Her hand had been stroking her large belly involuntarily since this morning, as if trying to calm a baby that was on a rampage. And admittedly, Georgia wasn't feeling so good. Her stomach had been aching for hours. And then Alex wouldn't come home from work. He knew that labor could start at any moment, so he could have stayed on. Alex was lucky to have a job. They hadn't lied to their parents about that when they left their hometown. In Washington, D.C., Alex had been hired by a large company as an engineer by training. The fact that he was hired with no work experience was a huge stroke of luck. And Alex worked hard to prove himself, often staying late at work. The bosses began to appreciate him for this. Everything went smoothly with the apartment too. In Washington, they'd bought an apartment no worse than the one they had in their hometown. Only it was unrenovated. But that would be done eventually. Postponed indefinitely now, sighed Georgia. We've been saving up for it, and Alex bought a car with it, and he got a loan. Suddenly, Georgia's stomach was pierced with pain, and sweat trickled down her legs. What is it? Has it really started? Where's Alex? Georgia grabbed her cell phone off the table and, fighting through the pain, dialed her husband. Alex, where are you? I think it's starting. I told you to come home on time. I'm already pulling into the yard, the guy answered excitedly. Is it really starting? Can't you come down by yourself? No, don't try. I'm already running. I'm running after you. In 10 minutes, Alex drove his wife to the maternity hospital, trying to drive the car quickly, but carefully, as the girl cried out at any shaking. It's nothing, nothing. We'll be there soon. We'll be there soon. Alex kept saying like an incantation, anxiously looking at Georgia. Georgia's labor was relatively easy. A couple of hours after she arrived at the hospital, the midwife gently patted the big girl's bottom as she let out a loud cry. Wow, what lungs we have! How we're screaming! What a good girl! A girl? Georgia asked in a weak voice, lying with slick, wet hair. A girl, smiled the midwife. Didn't you find out the sex of the baby at the ultrasound? No, my husband and I decided to let it be a surprise. Well, that's a good surprise. We girls are always better than those bullies. Isn't that right? The midwife winked at the exhausted woman in labor. But only Georgia herself was not sure whether Alex wanted a girl or still, like most men, dreamed of a son. When the girl recovered a little, already in the ward, she found the strength to take the phone and informed Alex very carefully, waiting for his reaction with tension. Girl. Great, shouted her husband into the phone. I have a daughter. Thank you. Georgiusz, I'm so happy. Well, can I visit you? Is it okay if I report to work tomorrow? I have to celebrate the birth of my daughter. Celebrate? Georgia was surprised. Are you going to drink? That was really weird. He hadn't had a drop to drink since that terrible event in their hometown, the day Alex had been blamed for it. It just sort of came out of the blue. Georgia didn't demand it of her husband, but Alex didn't drink. That's why the girl was so surprised now. No, how can you not drink in honor of such an occasion? Don't worry, I'm not going to get drunk. I'm going to get my coworkers drunk. Let them all be happy that I became a father. Whether Alex got drunk the next day or not, Georgia never found out. But most likely he was drunk because he didn't call her for almost 24 hours. And when he did, he spoke in a muffled voice. The girl turned out to be healthy and Georgia was discharged on time. Alex came to the discharge with a bunch of balloons and a huge bouquet of roses. He gently took the baby in his arms and looked into her face with delight. How small she is, my. the boy whispered, "My daughter, let's go home. Your mom's waiting for us." Georgia's mom came to stay with them for the first time after the baby was born to help her daughter, which Georgia was very happy about. Yeah, and Alex didn't mind. He was one of those rare sons-in-law who found it easy to get along with his mother-in-law. He was a great dad too. After his daughter was born, he stopped working late. Alex flew home with all his legs and did not let the baby out of his arms all evening. What an attentive dad Alex is. Georgia's mom nodded her head with a smile. It's rare to meet such fathers. Your dad was afraid to hold you until you were a year old, and here, look, does not leave the baby. The girl remained a baby for almost a week. The young parents could not agree on a name for the girl. For Alex it seemed super important, and he offered his own names, which, well, just categorically did not like Georgia. The mother-in-law was getting tired of listening to the arguments of young parents. My daughter cannot be called an ordinary name. Her name should be the most unusual and beautiful. After all, she herself is an unusual beauty, said Alex, suggesting old names from which Georgia only wrinkled her nose. But at one point, she was interested. What did you just say? What was the last name you said? Alice? Alex perked up. Alice, Alice, as if tasting us, Georgia repeated several times. Why, you know I like it. Maybe we'll call it that. No way. No way. Georgia's mom looked out of the other room. Finally, you two agree on something. Will you share with me what name you like? And so, a week after she was born, the baby girl became Alice. Georgia's mom, after staying with the young ones for a couple of months, decided to go home under the persistent pressure of her husband, who wouldn't stop calling her. But she promised to come back often. The woman liked being with her daughter's family. Alex and Georgia had lived quite peacefully before, but with the arrival of a child in their apartment reigned happiness. Alice grew up and developed quite well. By a year she was running around the apartment, waiting for her daddy to come home from work. Daddy came and the first thing, right in the hallway, knelt down on his knees and spread his arms apart, and to him ran, pouring with happy laughter, Alice. Georgia always looked at this with a smile and rejoiced, though she was a little jealous of her daughter. It seemed to her that Alice loved her daddy more than she loved herself, though she still sat with her on maternity leave and didn't even think about going out to work yet. Georgia had never imagined that Alex would be such a father. He was a father to Alice. One evening, watching her husband lying on the floor, trying to build with her daughter something from the constructor, Georgia suddenly thought, and this man was once tried to accuse of such atrocities. What a good girl, I was not afraid to defend him, not afraid to lie. I was right. Alex has become the kind of father you'd expect to find. If the coroner saw him now, he'd be ashamed of his suspicions. Georgia's mom was walking down the street when a young woman's voice called out to her. Looking closer, the woman recognized Anna, an old friend of her daughter's with whom Georgia had stopped talking after the famous events. "Hello, how are you?" "How is Georgia doing?" asked Anna politely. "Everything is fine, Anna," the woman smiled. "Georgia and Alex have a daughter growing up. Are you two still not in touch?" "You know, that's what I'm talking about. I miss Georgia so much, and now I'm about to go to Washington. That's where they moved, right? Well, I'd really like to see her. Could you give me Georgia's address?" "Yes, of course," rejoiced Georgia's mother, who was a little hurt that all her old friends were no longer in touch with her daughter. "I'll text you the address now." The woman pulled a notebook out of her bag, took out a piece of paper, and quickly scribbled down her daughter's address in Washington. Olia literally snatched it out of her hands and, muttering something, hurried away down the street, although Georgia's mother was determined to have a long conversation. The woman was so eager to share how happy her daughter was living. Only, this girl hadn't been interested in her former friend's light for a long time. With a quick step away from the woman, she went around the corner of the apartment building. There, shuffling from foot to foot with impatience, Maria was waiting for her. "How did it work out?" she asked hopefully as soon as Anna approached her. "It worked. Why not?" Anna replied. "Give me the money." Anna took the large bill from the stranger's hands and left, not the least bit interested in why the stranger needed Georgia's address. To be honest, Maria didn't fully understand it herself. What was it that kept her from living her life in peace? Why did she want to see Alex so badly? Years passed, and the woman did not calm down. Well, the saying time heals didn't work for her. It didn't work for her. Selena dreamed of her nights, screaming, calling for help. Maria stretched her arms out in longing for the cab to leave. And Alex, not without him. She dreamt about him almost every night, too, smirking, smug. Maria learned to live alone. She learned to go to work, to communicate with people, to behave as before, but her heart would not calm down. Soon the woman would have a vacation and she, not fully aware of her actions, made an attempt to find out Alex's address. The attempt was successful. The woman stared at the piece of paper with the address on it. This was where her daughter's killer lived. Should she go there? Maria didn't know the right answer to that question, but she knew she would go. Maybe she wanted to see that Alex was also unhappy, that the past did not give him peace of mind, that he received some kind of punishment, at least moral. It can't be that having done such a thing, this guy lives enjoying life. A week later, Maria went on vacation, and a couple of days later the train took her to the not-so-distant Washington. She arrived in the city early in the morning, and having left her things in the luggage room at the station, first of all went to the address written on a slightly wrinkled paper. Approaching the apartment building, the woman did not count on luck. Most likely, she would not see anyone on the first day. At this time, as a rule, all people go to work. However, Maria was wrong. She was just calculating the entrance she needed, and Alex himself came out of it. The woman shuddered, afraid that the guy would recognize her. However, his eyes slid over her indifferently. Alex stopped, holding the door, and a little girl of about 5 years old followed him. "Hurry up, daughter, or we'll be late for kindergarten," Alex told her. Maria felt as if she had been stabbed in the heart. She walked a little farther and stopped, pretending to tie the laces on her high boots. The woman continued to watch and saw everything. She saw how Alex, shaking his head at the sight of the huge puddle, did not hesitate to grab the girl in his arms so that she would not get her feet wet. How he lovingly placed his daughter in the child's seat and buckled her in for safety. In all of this young man's movements, a great love for the little girl slipped through. The car drove away, and Maria stood frozen in place. Tears of resentment came to her eyes. So that's how it is. Well-dressed, well-fashioned Alex is quite happy. He carries his daughter in his arms, smiles at her, having deprived Maria of her girl. Why is that? Why is that? What kind of injustice is that? When Maria came here to this town, she hoped at least that Alex was unhappy too. But he's got a daughter growing up. A daughter, not a son. What kind of a mockery of fate is this? Marie had nowhere to go, so she went back to the train station. Sat there in the waiting room and sat for a long time staring at the electronic scoreboard and not seeing it. The woman's thoughts were far away. 7 years had passed since her daughter Selena was gone, and her soul had not calmed down. And now it would be worse. Maria knew that for sure. How could one live knowing that a murderer was here enjoying the happiness of family life and fatherhood? And who needs my lonely, useless life? Ripened the sudden decision in the woman's mind. I'll put it down to Alex getting as bad as me. Yes, he won't be the only one to suffer, but his wife as well. That girl, Georgia. But she deserves it too. God knows she does. I will avenge you, Selena. Your murderer will know what real pain is and remember you. Maria rose resolutely from her seat. Walking over to the ticket office, she took a ticket to her hometown. What she had in mind required serious preparation. Returning home, the woman first of all quit her job, and then began to think whether to sell her apartment or not. She needed money, a lot of money. Although Maria had money. An account was opened in the bank, still her parents'. The woman didn't touch a penny of it. She had once dreamed that Selena would use the money to get a higher education, and then she forgot about it. What did she need alone? But now it's going to come in handy. If not for Selena, then to avenge her. On the other hand, once she's done what she's done, she's not likely to come back here. So why would she need this apartment? Maria opened a classifieds website and found a realtor. She called him and told him that the sale of the apartment is urgent. So what's next? Maria thought, thinking hard. They might be looking for her. We have to make sure they don't find her. Then the woman remembered the visit of her distant relative, which he paid her about 1.5 years ago, once again released from prison. The man was a regular at places not so remote, and when he was released he visited Marie. She took pity on him, fed him home-cooked food, and the last time, having eaten a hearty meal, the criminal opened up with a relative about his many acquaintances. And by the way, he left her his new phone number. Maria scrolled through the contacts. Right, there's Dustin. That's how she'd saved it. The woman called the number, really hoping that the relative had not managed to do anything and did not go back to prison. Maria was lucky. However, picking up the phone, the man could not understand who was calling him for a long time. And when he realized he was happy and began to talk about how he now lives, what kind of woman he found, Maria interrupted his revelations. Listen, Dustin, you know how you told me about your acquaintances in criminal circles? Yes, so what? The man was wary. Now I need to make use of your connections. Don't ask me why, but I need new documents. Is that possible? Nothing is impossible, Dustin smirked, but it's very expensive. Tell me how much I'm willing to pay. Alex was late for work and already standing at the door, looked at his wife pulling on Alice's brightly colored boots with some irritation. What a bunch of pussies you are, he grumbled. Can we get ready as quickly as possible? Let's go, Georgia replied, rising and taking her daughter's hand. But if you are absolutely late, go to work, I'll call a cab, and I'll take Alice to the kindergarten myself. Alex hesitated. He looked at his watch, then at his daughter. No, don't, the young man replied. My princess shouldn't have to take a cab when Daddy has his own car. Right, Alice? Yes, Daddy, smiled the girl. I'll be in a hurry now, really, you won't be late. The family went down the elevator, and as soon as they got out of it, Alex grabbed his daughter in his arms. Daddy, I'm already big. I can walk with my legs, Alice whimpered. It's okay, you'll run around in kindergarten, and now we are in a hurry. Getting into the car, Alex nervously looked around. He had a bad feeling lately. It seemed that a malevolent look was staring into his back. Oh, come on, that's ridiculous. The man dismissed his suspicions. I'm beginning to see something. I'm overworking, I guess. Alex did work a lot, but it was worth it. The apartment had long ago been made expensive repairs, and the man's car was already much more solid than in the beginning, when they just moved to Washington. The family lived well, and little Alice did not need anything. Her father fulfilled her every whim, which was often dissatisfied with Georgia. So the other day, she and her husband had a dispute over a cell phone given to their daughter. Alex, but it's too early for Alice. No one carries a cell phone to daycare. But my daughter will, Alex cut her off. And if anything goes wrong, she'll call her daddy. Yes, Alice? He winked at his daughter. A little later, Alex regretted his words. Alice called him nonstop and distracted him from his work. Now, taking his daughter to kindergarten, the man decided to talk to her. Alice, listen, I am very glad that you have learned to call on the phone, but let's make a deal with you so that you will call me only in extreme cases, when something really serious happens. The rest of the little things like Frank getting cereal on his face, you'll tell me in the evenings when I get home from work. Deal? What's an emergency? The kid was wondering. What serious thing would have to happen for me to call you? Georgia, sitting next to her husband in the front passenger seat, grinned. She immediately understood the danger of such a gift to her daughter, and on the first day, she had explained to Alice that when her mother was at work, she should not be disturbed. But Alex tried to do it only now. And that could not formulate his request. Look, Alice, seriously is when, for example, you hurt yourself, God forbid, of course, or someone's hurt you. That's when you call me. Daddy will take care of it. Okay, Daddy, I understand. Alice nodded importantly. Frank was mean to me just yesterday. He said I'm a chatterbox because my mouth never closes. When he insults me like that, can I call you? Georgia was already laughing openly, and Alex sighed heavily. No, Alice, you don't understand. It doesn't count as an offense, but if Frank had beaten you. As they talked, the family drove to the daycare center. And although Alice was taken there by her mother, Alex hurriedly jumped out of the car to kiss his daughter. Already entering the gate, Georgia looked back. Alex, will you wait for me, or are you running late? I'll wait for you, of course I will. Just hurry up. Don't take too long. Understood, said Georgia and turned to her daughter. All right, Alice, let's go. Feet, 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 hurry, hurry. Daddy's in a hurry. Georgia was happy. Why shouldn't she be? A full house, a handsome, loving husband who couldn't get enough of their child. The girl went to work. She got a job in the personnel department of the very enterprise where Alex worked. He was the one who got her the job. Georgia's salary was small, but it did not embarrass them. Alex received more than well. In the HR department, her female co-workers looked at her enviously when her husband would pick her up on his lunch break and they would go out to eat together. There was a lot to envy. Alex, who had once been just a handsome guy, had turned into a very prominent young man. Georgia jumped out of the daycare center without paying attention to the cab car that had just stopped behind Alex's car. For some reason, no one was in a hurry to get out of it. Maria was in the cab, and she was paying the fare and stalling on purpose, not wanting to get out until Alex and his wife drove away. Just because he didn't recognize her didn't mean Georgia wouldn't either. Women tended to be more attentive, and Alex himself had been acting a little twitchy lately, always looking around when Maria was watching him. It seemed that the man could feel her angry, hateful gaze. Finally, Maria saw the car ahead of her drive away. Then she, too, got out of the cab. There they were, the gate of the garden. Maria had already examined this very garden from the outside, coming here every day as if it were work. The woman already knew the schedule of children's walks, knew all the teachers by sight. The woman already realized in whose shift she would try to take Alice away. Of course, the shift of the youngest one, who was always on the phone while the children were walking. Children usually walked in the yard. It was necessary to go around the block, and there, from behind the usual fence, easily visible playground for children. There, before lunch, the children who were taken out for a walk played noisily. Opposite the fence was a park. You could walk in it without arousing suspicion or sit on a bench, which Maria had been doing for more than a week. The woman knew the weak spot in the fence, and what there was to know. She herself, with her own hands, bent a leaf, having come here one evening, when there was no one in the garden except the elderly watchman. Now, the only thing to do was to choose the moment when Alice would come close to the gap in the fence. Maria was on duty every day, but there was no chance. Either the teacher was from vigilance, or the girl played far from the fence. And so, in the second week of her observations, Maria noticed Alice near the fence. The woman's heart beat faster. She raced toward the garden. It was now or never, Maria decided. The teacher was the same one, a young woman who paid little attention to the children. The woman pulled back a leaf and called out in a loud whisper, "Alice, come here, girl." The child wondered who it was calling her name. The girl approached and, tilting her head, peered through the hole. "Who are you, Auntie? How do you know my name?" "I'm an acquaintance of your daddy's. He's waiting for you around the corner, and he's got a surprise for you. Come on, get out of the hole. You and I will go to him." The girl incredulously furrowed her brow, looked at her unfamiliar aunt. "Why is he waiting for me around the corner? Why didn't he come for me himself?" "I told you, Daddy has a surprise for you. Why do you doubt it? Your dad's name is Alex and your mom's name is Georgia. Isn't that right?" "Yes, it's true," nodded her head importantly. "And what surprise has my daddy prepared for me?" Alice became very curious. "All right, so be it. Pretend, sighed Maria, I'll tell you. But you still be surprised when Daddy presents." "Okay. Daddy brought you a beautiful fluffy kitten. He couldn't wait till the end of the day. You wanted to make you happy." "A kitten?" joyfully shrieked Alice, so that Maria was even afraid, as if this shout did not attract the attention of the teacher. The young teacher did not lift her head from the phone. The little girl slipped unnoticed through the hole in the fence and trustingly followed the unfamiliar aunt, waiting for a kitten from her daddy. Georgia was on her lunch break, so she and her husband were having lunch at a cafe not far from the business where they both worked. The girl's cell phone was on the table next to her, and Georgia was a little surprised to see the name of her daughter's teacher's fatherland pop up on the screen. Still, her heart didn't sense trouble until she picked up the phone. Georgia listened in silence for a while. Then her face changed. "What are you talking about? How could this happen? What do you mean she's nowhere to be found? So you're telling me that after the walk, you didn't notice Alice was gone? And you only realized she was gone when you saw the empty bed when the kids went to bed at bedtime? Are you serious? Stop crying and find my girl. We'll be right there." Tensely watching his wife's conversation, Alex jumped up from his seat, almost knocking over the table. What's wrong with Alice?" Georgia raised frightened eyes at her husband. "The teacher says she's missing. Allegedly, after the walk, Alice didn't go indoors with the others." Wait, how can that be?" Alex excitedly took his cell phone out of his pocket. "I'm going to dial her now. I'll call Alice." "You forgot, she has her own phone now." The man started calling his daughter, putting her on speakerphone. The husband and wife listened tensely to the long beeps and were already desperate when the other end picked up the phone. "Alice, daughter, answer. Where are you? Alex shouted. Alice can't answer now, said a very vaguely familiar female voice. Who are you? Why you have our daughter's cell phone? Maybe because I have your daughter. I took the girl's phone away from her. She won't need it anymore, the woman replied. Who the hell are you? Did you kidnap my daughter? Yes, you're right. I kidnapped Alice, except she's still alive, unlike my Selena. Remember what you did to my little girl? Suddenly Alex understood. He realized what had made him so uncomfortable the last few days, when it felt like he was being watched, and something else. That face had flashed recently, flashed somewhere in the courtyard of their house or somewhere else. The man couldn't remember. He hadn't recognized Maria at that moment either, but now her face was clearly in front of his eyes. Alex's palm instantly sweated, and the phone began to slip out of it. Then Georgia grabbed the phone. What do you want from us, what? She shouted excitedly. Money? You want money? We'll pay you whatever you want. Hello, Georgia, Maria snorted. Well, girl, you remember me? Remember how I cried and convinced you that you were living with a monster who took away the meaning of my life? I don't want that kind of life, but I won't give you any more. Can you seriously offer me money? Why? Is it to replace my daughter? You think money can replace your Alice? That's just it. What do you want from us then? Alex shouted. I want to deprive you of what you deprived me of, said the woman to the parents, who were freezing with horror. But for now, I won't be in a hurry. Alice will live as long as you follow my instructions, and here's the first thing. You mustn't make a fuss about your daughter's disappearance. If you go to the police, you'll never see her again. I buried my daughter, and I'll let you bury Alice. Is that understood? How can we not make a fuss? There's already panic at the daycare center. I wouldn't be surprised if the teachers call the police before we get there. That's your problem. You have to handle it the way you want. That's your concern. Take my word for it. If you go to the police, you won't see your daughter alive. Don't try to sneak around, I'll find out. I'll turn this phone off now and call you next time tonight. Then we'll talk about the next steps. Maria disconnected and immediately, following her word, turned off Alice's phone. Of course, she was bluffing. How could she know whether Alex and Georgia would go to the police or not? But she understood the psychology of parents who were afraid to make an extra move now. It was unlikely they would disobey her instructions. Maria hid the phone in her bag so Alice wouldn't find it and only then went to the other room. There a disgruntled little girl was whining. Auntie, where's Daddy? You promised me. I promised you a kitten, and here he is. The woman showed her hand on a fluffy ball curled up on the girl's lap. Why don't you play with it? I've already played. I want to go home to Mommy and Daddy. When are you taking me to them? Your mom and dad had to leave town and they asked me to take care of you. So cry me a river, you're gonna have to live here. Then why did you take my cell phone? I want to make a call. You can't call. I told you. Your parents are busy. Sit still. If you want to eat, I'll feed you now. At this time on Alice's lap moved awake from the conversation gray kitten, and the girl switched to him. Yes, I want to eat and my kitty also wants to eat. And what does Kodia like? Kitty likes milk, and I made you some milk noodles. When the phone buzzed, Alex threw the phone furiously on the cafe table, as if it was his fault for the sad news. What is it? Muttered the shocked Georgia. That woman must be out of her mind. Probably crazy, Alex answered. You can expect anything from crazy people. Hurry up, let's go to the daycare center. We have to settle things there before they think of calling the police. Are we going to follow her instructions? Georgia said, more affirmatively than questioningly. From now, Alex said, it's scary to disobey, very scary. You heard everything yourself. What if that crazy woman is really? Alex couldn't finish the sentence, but Georgia understood him. Sometime later, when they drove up to Alice's garden, Georgia wiped her tears in the car and carefully powdered her face so that her upset look would not be noticeable. Only then did the girl enter the building. Snorting contemptuously in the direction of the crying young teacher, Georgia went straight to the office of the headmistress. Tell me, what's going on here? Without saying hello, the girl began to indignant right from the threshold. My husband today decided to pick up Alice early, came and approached the children when they were on a walk. Your teacher didn't even dare. What are you trying to tell me now? That Alice was taken away by her father? Jumped out of the table headmistress, who had previously sat with her hands clasped her head and imagined the terrible consequences of the missing child for the garden and for herself. Of course the father, who else could it be? So, you didn't say anything. So you stole your own child from the daycare center? What do you mean, you stole? Georgia raised her voice. My husband went over to my daughter to tell the teacher he was picking her up, but she was so busy that she didn't even notice the man on the playground. What do you call that? Why don't you watch the kids? We'll file a complaint. Don't complain, the headmistress said in a conciliatory voice. We will take action. The teacher will be severely punished. I hope so. I think punished is not the right word. She should be fired. Such irresponsible people should not be working with children. With these words, Georgia turned around and left the office. The headmistress ran after the girl and, in an ingratiating voice, looking into the girl's face, asked, "And Alice will come to the kindergarten tomorrow?" "No," said Georgia. "Alice will not come to this kindergarten. Not yet, definitely not going. We'll think about moving her to another place." Georgia and Alex sat silently at the kitchen table. In front of them were 2 glasses of cool tea, and in the center of the table was a telephone. The couple had nothing more to say to each other. They waited, waiting for the call. This call, at this moment, was more important to them than anything else in the world. Maria had called late at night, on purpose to make Alex and Georgia more nervous. The woman seemed to revel in their suffering. "What, are you waiting?" she asked when Alex grabbed the phone. "Waiting," the man replied briefly. "As Alice, let us talk to her." "What do you think? You're the one who's going to dictate terms to me. Alice is fine for now, but I'm not gonna let you talk to her. You'll have to settle for my voice. Do you want your daughter to live?" "Of course I do." "What a question," Alex yelled. "But you didn't spare my Selena. I'll never hear her laugh again, never see her grow up. I dream about her at night, asking for help. And what happened to her before she died? I can't even think about it. It's been so many years, and I can't rest. I don't want to live. Now I know what I'm gonna do. I'll lay my life on the altar of your suffering. You must answer for what you've done." "What have I done?" "What?" Alex screamed. "How can't you realize it wasn't me? Even the coroner, after forensics, cleared me of suspicion. And not just on George's word. How can you still not understand that?" "I don't want to hear any of your excuses. I don't want to hear any of your excuses," Maria shrieked. "Don't lie to me. You're not fooling me. I know for sure it's you. I felt uneasy as soon as I put my daughter in your car. I saw the look in your eyes, the crazy look in your eyes. Don't try to tell me it wasn't your fault again." "What should I say then?" Alex asked tiredly. "You have to tell me everything. Everything that happened that night. Everything you did to my little girl. I need to know, no matter how hard it is for me to hear. I have nothing to tell you. Then this conversation is over. I'll give you time to think and call you back tomorrow. Just think carefully. My patience is not unlimited. Tomorrow you'll go to work and act like nothing happened. I'm warning you one last time. Don't make a fuss." There were short beeps in the phone and Alex grabbed his head. This is a hopeless situation. Just hopeless. She's crazy. How are we going to get Alice back now? Georgia, who was sitting at the table staring at one point and listening attentively to the conversation between her husband and Maria, slowly raised her heavy gaze to Alex. "Why does she say that you came after Selena in a deranged state? You really weren't yourself that night, but you told me you took a pill, felt sick, and went straight home. So you lied to me? And you were already drugged at 10:00 p.m. when you put the girl in the cab. Why else would she know that? I never told anyone what state you came home in. She couldn't have guessed." "Well, maybe I took a pill before I told you. So what? What does it matter now?" "It makes a huge difference. It turns out you lied to me about that. It also turns out you were already out of it by 10:00 and you didn't get home until 3:00. And what did you do in that state?" "Taxiing," Alex snapped at me. "Enough of this already. Let's think about what to do next. She'll call tomorrow, and what? What will I tell her?" "You'll confess," Georgia said calmly. "Confess to what?" Alex got upset. "Everything. You'll say you didn't know what was going on. You don't remember half of it. In short, make up whatever you want. This crazy woman wants to hear a confession, so she has to hear it. You don't think this crazy woman wants me to confess for a reason? She'll probably be recording our conversation on a tape recorder. Let her record it. What we need right now is for her to get our daughter back, and then you can explain that you made it up under duress." Georgia and Alex sat in the kitchen until 3 in the morning, arguing and disagreeing, deciding what they would do when Maria called again. Then Georgia looked at the glowing dial on the microwave. "It's 3 o'clock. You should try to get some sleep." "She did tell you to go to work, didn't she?" "Of course I'm not going. Come by HR tomorrow and tell them I'm on sick leave. Now let's try to get some sleep." Georgia knew she wouldn't be able to sleep anyway, but she had no more energy to argue with her husband. In the bedroom, the girl lay on her back and lay in the dark, with wide open eyes, from which from time to time tears flowed out. Alex stirred next to her for a long time, then forgot himself in a restless half-dream. He had talked in his sleep before, but now the words turned into shouts. "Alice, daughter, Alice," the man called painfully. Then his voice changed. It became different, very different. It was the kind of voice Georgia rarely heard from her husband. "I will not answer alone. I won't, you hear me? It's your fault," Alex shouted in his sleep and woke up, jerking on the bed. "Who were you talking to? What were you dreaming about?" Georgia asked cautiously. "I wasn't dreaming about anything," snapped the man. He got out of bed and headed to the bathroom to wash off the cold sweat that had appeared on his face during the dream. Closing the door behind him, Alex washed his face and stared at his reflection in the mirror. Droplets trickled down his drawn cheekbones and fell on the sink. Of course, Alex remembered his dream. In the dream, he dreamed of the man he was destined to meet that very ill-fated evening. He had told Alex his name was Donald. Donald was supposedly on a business trip in Alex's city and was having a good time. He was the one who offered the cabbie that pill, and more than one. Alex had taken at least 3 of them over the course of the evening. He liked this state, the feeling of omnipotence. And Donald was in no hurry to leave the cab. That's when the guy got a call to an address he already knew. "Oh, there's a girl to pick up. I've been there before. You pick up the girl, take her to a relative's house. Her mother pays in advance." "A girl, you say?" Donald's eyes lit up. "Let's take the girl together." "That would be strange." Alex hesitated. "Her mother is seeing her off, and there's a man in the car besides the driver." "All right, drop me off somewhere nearby, around the corner. You pick up the girl, put me back in the car." Alex seemed to be having a lot of fun at that moment, and he agreed. Selena's mom looked at him suspiciously, but kept silent. All because Alex, in light of what Donald had said, looked at Selena with different eyes. Now, standing in the bathroom, Alex could hardly take his eyes off his reflection, and grabbing a towel, furiously began to rub his wet face. He tried so hard, he wanted so much all these years to erase the memories of that evening from himself, to forget Selena's and Donald's face. And now it all came back with such clarity. When he pulled around the corner, he put Donald back in the car. He didn't get into the front seat, but climbed into the back, next to the confused girl. "Oh, what a pretty little girl we have here," the man sang, holding out his arms to Selena. And Alex laughed, laughing, watching in the rearview mirror at what was happening in the seat. How much fun he was having at that moment, how omnipotent he felt. Alex washed his face once more and left the bathroom, trying to be quiet so as not to wake up his wife, who was napping as he thought. However, as soon as he stepped into the hallway, he came across Georgia standing there in the darkness. "What are you doing?" the man asked in a whisper. "What are you standing here for?" "Tell me everything. Tell me what happened that night," Georgia said in a grave voice. "You know everything. What else do I have to tell you?" Alex was frightened. "No, as it turned out, I don't know anything. And the worst thing is that I don't know you at all. You talk in your sleep, Alex. And now you've confessed everything when you were asleep. I heard everything." Georgia lied a little. "What could I have been mumbling in my sleep?" the man asked with a nervous chuckle. "I don't know what I was dreaming about." "Stop lying," Georgia raised her voice. "Our daughter's life is at stake right now. The life of your beloved Alice. Now I can understand the pain of that poor woman who stole Alice. Maybe she's crazy, but who are you? How could you hurt a girl? It's a child, Alex. How could you look at her with lust?" Georgia purposely did not turn on the light in the hallway, so that her husband would not see with what horror and disgust she looked at him. She was rethinking a lot of things now, after her husband's Bormodorgia in the dream. But more than anything else, she wanted Alex to refute all of her horrible guesses. She wanted her to be wrong. And her husband suddenly shouted, "What are you talking about? How could I look at the child with lust? It wasn't me, it wasn't me. It was another man, my client, who did it by slipping me those damn pills. I wasn't thinking straight. I didn't fully understand what he was doing." "So it happened in your car?" Georgia asked, trying to keep her composure. No, of course not. It started in my car, but when I realized what Donald was up to, I took him and the girl behind the abandoned stadium. By then it was getting dark outside. We got out of the car. It all happened there. Were you there all the way? Georgia, listen to me. I'm telling you, I didn't know what I was doing. Yes, I was there. Donald asked me to be a part of it, but I didn't. No, I swear. I was horrified myself when I realized what that business trip guy had done. But you know, when he was done and he was getting in the car, the girl was still alive, and I was afraid she'd point the finger at me. Donald's not a local. He's not a local. He took the train and he was gone. Look for him later. I told Donald about it, and he suggested I finish the girl myself. But I couldn't. You hear me, Georgia? I couldn't. Donald had to do that too. What? What did you say? Georgia whispered. You asked that man to kill the girl so she wouldn't recognize you, so she could stay alive. Georgia, you saw me that night. Did I look like myself? You think I didn't curse myself that night? You've lived with me for so many years. Am I such a bad person? Yeah, I was scared, so what? Anyone would be scared. Anyone? Georgia squealed. Did you say anyone? Anybody couldn't have been in your place. Are you a bad person? As it turns out, you're not a human being at all. I don't know who you are. Why did you confess everything back at the police station? I would have gone to jail. I would have gone to jail as an accessory. And you should be. I have to. The girl squealed, completely out of control. And this other one, he's walking the earth, and who knows what he's done since then. And it will be your fault too, yours. You have to confess everything. Confess to that woman. Go to the police. Tell them to look for the killer. You describe what he looks like and they'll be able to track him down. Alex saw that his wife was becoming hysterical and stepped towards her and slapped Georgia. Calm down. I'm not going to confess anything. Think about it. I have a job, a good job. I'm respected by my coworkers. I have a great family. Yes, I've made mistakes. I've slipped up. But it wasn't me at the time. What am I supposed to do now? Sit down. And by the way, don't forget that you're going to be held accountable. You perjured yourself. You covered for me that night. How can you prove you didn't do it willfully without knowing what happened? Georgia squatted down in the dark hallway and clasped her face with her palms. Let it, she whispered through her fingers. It's my fault. I'll be responsible. This woman, Maria, she's not a murderer and she won't do anything to Alice. She's just an unhappy mother who wants justice, and she should get it. Why didn't I listen to her years ago? Then she kept telling me it was your fault. She's a mother, she felt. You're not a human being. You're a monster. Alex hovered over his wife, his hands involuntarily clenched into fists. For the first time in his life, a man wanted to hit Georgia. To hit her so that she would shut up. Shut up and not repeat those terrible words. He was already sorry he told her everything under her pressure. Somehow it seemed that having lived with him in peace and harmony for so many years, his wife would understand him, would accept the only mistake in his life. Shut up, the man yelled. I don't want to talk to you anymore. You should be on my side. But you're right about one thing. That crazy woman isn't the killer. She can't hurt Alice. And I'm a fool for going along with her. I'll go to the police in the morning. They'll find her quickly and give us our daughter back. You're going to the police? Georgia raised a tear-stained face. You'll report your daughter's kidnapping and you'll tell them about your guilt? Will you confess? That's it, Georgia. That's it. Calm down. The man leaned over and took his wife by the shoulders, trying to get her to her feet. Georgia recoiled from him. Don't touch me, she squealed again. Okay. Alex raised his palms in the air. I realize what you just found out may be a shock to you, but you need to think it through. Have I been a bad husband and a bad father to Alice? I've provided for you, taken care of you. I've given my life for my daughter. Then do it, Georgia hissed. Admit what you've done for your daughter and for the suffering soul of a poor woman. How have you lived with it all these years? How? Didn't Selena come to you in your dreams, in your nightmares? I crossed that moment out of my life, crossed it out and tried to forget it. It wasn't as hard as you think, because it wasn't me at that moment. You know, I stopped drinking after that night. It was scary to be even a little bit of what I was that night. Alex cautiously tried to approach his wife once more, but Georgia pulled her hand forward warningly. Stay back. More than anything, I want to jump out of this apartment and go somewhere far away, to forget everything I'd learned last night. Except, unlike you, I can't live with that. I can't. Georgia staggered backward and went into the bedroom, shutting the door tightly behind her. Her husband stood there, frowning his eyebrows and staring at that door. Georgia was out of her mind, suggesting he give in. He hadn't expected her to react that way. Though maybe if he went to the police now with a confession, Maria would immediately bring Alice back. Her thirst for revenge would be satisfied. And him? Why should he suffer? That mad woman wouldn't touch his daughter anyway. It's strange that he didn't realize it right away. When Alex went to the police and filed a report about his daughter's kidnapping, they were very surprised. Why didn't you come to us right away? Especially since the kidnapper called from your daughter's cell phone. Even if she turns off her cell phone, we'll be able to pinpoint her location. Now, we can only hope she hasn't gotten rid of the phone by now. She hasn't. Alex grinned wryly. She's supposed to call from it again tonight. And how much money is she demanding from you for the girl? What did you promise her? That you would raise the necessary amount? She doesn't want money. That woman is crazy. She thinks I had something to do with her daughter's death and wants me to confess. But it's not true. Alex hastened to assure her, seeing how the policeman frowned at his last words. My innocence is proven, but this woman, unfortunately, it is impossible to prove anything. She's crazy. If she's crazy, that's a different matter. It's scary. I don't know what's in her mind. But on the other hand, she may not have thought to get rid of the phone. When the police burst into the apartment Maria had rented long before, they were very surprised. The woman was sure that neither Alex nor Georgia would go to the authorities, fearing for Alice's life. Maria judged for herself. She certainly wouldn't have gone if she'd been told her Selena's life depended on it. The cops opened the door and flew into the apartment. Alice was in the kitchen at the time, eating delicious cutlets that the strict, but at the same time absolutely not evil Aunt Maria had fried for her. Kodja, who was rubbing against the girl's leg. He also had some cutlets. One of the men in uniform came into the kitchen and took the girl in his arms. Don't be afraid. Your name is Alice, right? I'll take you to your mom and dad. And I'm not afraid, replied Alice. But your daddy and mommy are gone. That's what Aunt Maria told me. She said they had something to do and had to leave immediately. They're back and waiting for you at home. Did Aunt Maria hurt you? She took away my phone, which my father gave me. How did the girl? But she gave me Kodja. Let me go. I want to ask Aunt Maria if she'll let me take Kodja with me. I think she will, said the policeman, picking up the kitten from the floor. Here, take it. Aunt Maria doesn't have time right now. The policeman, taking the girl with the kitten out of the apartment, tried to make sure that the girl did not see how Maria was handcuffed in the other room. After that, a search of the apartment was started and forged documents were found there, and not only for Maria. They also found a fake birth certificate for a child, a girl of 5 years old. According to this certificate, she was Maria's daughter. So, the policeman held up the forged passport and birth certificate. And you claimed to the parents that you would give them back their daughter. So it wasn't part of your plans and you lied to them. No, I didn't lie, Maria calmly replied, resigned to the situation. I would have returned Alice to Georgia if Alex had confessed to his crime. I would never hurt that girl. But if Alex put his own well-being above his daughter's life, I would leave with Alice. I'd go into hiding, and he'd never see his daughter again. He has to take some responsibility for what he's done. He must suffer. I'd punish him at least this way. I'd let him and his wife think their daughter was dead, too. They deserved it. I don't know what happened, but what you did is a very serious crime. Kidnapping a child. And I don't know what you wanted from the girl's father. Okay, we'll figure it out. You'll figure it out. You will? The woman laughed a sinister laugh. My Selena died so brutally, and you've been dealing with this for years. I'm tired of knocking on every door and proving that Alex did it. No one believes me. My little girl's murder still goes unpunished. And now you're telling me you're gonna figure it out? What the hell do you have to figure out? The policeman glanced warily at the woman who was laughing her creepy laugh. She had seemed quite normal to him before she laughed. She must be crazy, he thought. The girl's father isn't lying. That woman is insane with grief. He also said she was already in a mental institution. She'll probably go back there. Except this time she's not likely to come out quickly, if at all. The man who had taken Alice to her overjoyed parents noticed that the atmosphere in their apartment was tense. Yes, of course, both of them rushed to meet Alice, and both of them were overjoyed. Only here, between the couple themselves as if a cat ran. It was noticeable even from the outside. Alice alone did not notice anything. The girl was happy to be back home. "Daddy, when did you come back? And where did you go without me?" "Aunt Maria said you wouldn't be back for a while." "Aunt Maria said?" Alex frowned. "What else did she say?" "Nothing else. She gave me a kitten. His name is Kodia. Here." The girl showed her parents a small gray lump that looked frighteningly out of her sinuses. "Can Kodia live with us?" "Of course, let him live," smiled exhaustedly Georgia. "So Aunt Maria was good to you?" "I already told my uncle the policeman. Aunt Maria took away my cell phone. She's strict. Why did you decide to leave me with her?" Alex opened his mouth, ready to speak about Maria, but his wife gave him a warning look and prevented him from saying a word. Quickly speaking, "It happened, Alice, it happened. We were in a great hurry. You tell me, are you hungry? Did Aunt Maria feed you long ago?" "No, just now. She fried me some cutlets, and she let Coda have one too." Georgia saw that her daughter was quite well with Maria and did not want to traumatize her with stories about the kidnapping and that this woman could harm her. The child didn't need that information. Let her think that Aunt Maria is actually an acquaintance of theirs, and in all likelihood, she couldn't hurt the girl. Maria wanted to hurt Alex, make him confess, not hurt the child. And to some extent, Georgia understood the grief-stricken woman, though she didn't approve of her methods. But putting herself in Maria's place, she could not clearly answer how she would have acted in her place. It was frightful to imagine that she could have lost Alice, and in such a monstrous way. In fact, anyone could go crazy here. Alex could not look at his daughter back home, but his phone was ringing off the hook. The man got tired of ringing and picked up the phone. "Okay, I'll be right there," he said curtly. "It's urgent to get to work." The man turned to his wife, who hadn't spoken to him since the night before. "The papers need to be signed. Drive Georgia through." As soon as her husband, hastily dressed, left the apartment, Georgia said to her daughter, "Alice, we're going to Grandma and Grandpa's now. Come on, get your things together." "And Daddy, why is not going with us?" wondered the child. "Daddy can't. He has work. You heard yourself. He will come to us later, when he has settled all his affairs. Let's put your things away." "And Kodia?" The girl whimpered. "We're not leaving Kodia, are we? He's coming with us to his grandparents?" "Let him go," sighed Georgia tiredly, "but just so that we would not be dropped off the train with your Kodia." "Okay, on the way we'll stop at a pet store and buy a cat carrier." When Alex returned home a few hours later, he found neither his wife nor his daughter at home, only a mess in the apartment. It was obvious that Georgia had packed hastily, but still, she had time to scribble a note to her husband. "I'm taking Alice and going to my parents' house. Don't try to follow us. We won't live with you anymore anyway. I do not know how to live on with such a burden. Go to the police and confess what you did." Dustin was trying to make borscht. It wasn't his first attempt, but unfortunately for the pensioner, it wasn't as good as his late wife's. She had borscht, but the man's was just red water. His wife died a long time ago before Dustin retired. So the man continued to work even at retirement age, because no one was waiting for him at home. But the last case knocked him out of his rut and forced the investigator to retire. It was the case of the murdered girl. The apartment doorbell rang. The man was glad someone remembered the old man and decided to visit him. Maybe one of his co-workers. Dustin opened the door and stared at the unfamiliar young woman. Why unfamiliar though? He'd seen her somewhere. I wish you could remember where. "You don't remember me," Georgia concluded. "Your case when the girl died. I was in your office writing a statement. I wrote that my boyfriend was home at 11 o'clock at night. My boyfriend's a cab driver." "Yeah, don't go on. I remember," Dustin said. "I apologize for coming to your house. I know you're retired, but you're the one I wanted to talk to. Come in now that you're here." The man stepped aside, letting the girl enter the apartment. Georgia talked impulsively, confusedly, poppily. It was evident that she had prepared for this speech in advance. She stopped talking abruptly. There was a tense silence in the apartment. Dustin sighed heavily and lifted his head to Georgia, who was blushing with excitement. "I suspected something like that at the time. No, I didn't think your Alex was guilty, or I wouldn't have let him go so easily. There was, some DNA mismatch, but I saw you lying. I saw it. So what now? I'm retired. Why did you come to me with your confession? Help me. Come with me to the police station and we'll tell the story together. You know how it's done, who to go to. I'll sign everything. I'll confess everything. Is it true you've lived with this man for so many years and didn't realize he might be involved? You're ready to confess, but do you realize you'll be tried too? The crime is heavy, and for giving false testimony in such a case, you could face a real term or correctional labor. I'm ready. Georgia bravely looked her former investigator in the eye. I know, and I'm ready to answer for my guilt. Let Alex do the same. And most importantly, you must find the other one. My husband said his name was Donald. The new investigator, he'll be looking, won't he? This case, how you say, isn't it out of date? There's no statute of limitations on such cases. Dustin said sternly, rising from his seat. Wait for me here, I'll change my clothes, and we'll go with you to the police. The next day Alex was arrested. It was a complete surprise to the man. No matter how his wife behaved, he was sure that she would not go to the police. After all, then she would have to answer to the law too. Alex thought that Georgia would cool down a bit, rethink everything, and come back to him. He was a good husband. Alex was transferred to his hometown, and there, the new young investigator came in for his first interrogation, along with the one who had once handled the case. Dustin, I think his name is, Alex remembered. I know what you're trying to accuse me of, but it's no use, he grinned. My wife and I had a fight, and she decided to ruin my life. She's lying. The young investigator, who had hoped for a heartfelt confession, was confused. A lot of time had passed, and in fact, except for George's words, there was nothing to present to this polished man. However, Dustin wasn't confused. I'll tell you what, Alex, you're not gonna get away with it this time. Georgia told me everything. The actual time you came home, the condition you were in, and most importantly, the clothes you washed last night. And there's one more thing. At about 11:30 that night, Georgia's upstairs neighbor came by. Your wife concealed that fact at the time, so the neighbor can also confirm that you weren't home at that time. Anyway, you're going to jail. If you don't start telling the truth, you'll go to jail for everything. I'd already know there were two of you and you were a passive observer. But if you don't start testifying, you'll go down alone as the only guilty party. Dustin was bluffing a little. George's testimony wasn't enough to convict Alex, but he didn't know that. The pale Alex felt like the circle had closed and became truly afraid. It was scary to go to jail, and on such a charge. The former investigator, without letting Alex think, kept pressing him. He knew the right pressure points. You already know that it's not me, not me. Alex, crushed morally, almost cried. It was that business traveler. His name was Donald. And now be more detailed. The young investigator became more active. What kind of Donald? In what hotel did he stay? Where did you pick him up from, and where did you take him? Dustin exhaled and only watched his colleague, who had taken the bull by the horns. Alex began to tell, not trying to hide anything else. The man remembered every little detail that could be used to track Donald down. Literally in a week, the police had figured out all the men of the right age who were on a business trip in their city at that time. And within a couple of days, the notorious Donald was identified. He turned out not to be Donald at all. The man had given the cab driver a false name. The only truth was that the man was on a business trip. That's why the criminal felt so unpunished in a foreign city. This man turned out to be an excellent family man with 2 grown-up children. During the investigation, another terrible detail came to light. In the hometown of the criminal, after the events that took place here, there were 2 similar murders of girls. Apparently, the man, who could now safely be called a maniac, got into the taste. Dustin, when he found out, was very upset. After all, it was possible to prevent the subsequent murders if he had brought Alex to light. The investigator felt guilty. Although it became clear what Alex was so afraid of, perhaps he had not told his wife the whole truth about that night. The detainee, the imaginary Donald, claimed that he was going to leave the girl on the vacant lot alive, and it was Alex who strangled her, afraid that the child would recognize him. The investigation was still far from over, but it was already clear that both Donald and Alex would receive huge sentences. Dustin pushed for Georgia to mitigate the punishment and give the minimum, due to the late but repentance. It was only because of her that this old case had been brought up and brought to a conclusion. Maria stood at the window of the mental hospital with her gaze fixed on the distance. An absent-minded smile wandered on her lips. A few minutes ago, a former investigator had walked out from her to tell her that the killer had finally been caught. And not just one. There were two of them. Now the woman knew for sure she'd done the right thing by not settling down about Alex. She may have kidnapped an innocent child, but in the end it resulted in catching the real culprits. God knows she didn't hurt the girl. As Dustin was leaving, he turned around. "By the way, I almost forgot. I wanted to give you George's words. She's on her knees apologizing to you. She is guilty and cursing herself for what she did."